relief mine too. Through others' eyes. The mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and all nations shall flow unto it. For brass I will bring gold, and for iron I will bring silver. Isaiah 60:17. June 1998. Preface. One of the most interesting mining episodes in American history is the story of the Coyle Mining Company. It holds the dubious record for operating the longest time without ever producing any ore. It recently passed its 100th anniversary, September 1894, and the hopeful promoters and stockholders are in greater numbers today than ever before. But even stranger than this was the fact that no mine or its manager ever had so many unique and incredible stories connected with them. Yet the man himself, John H. Coyle, never wrote even a paragraph to the public about himself or his mine. Bishop Coyle has been dead for nearly 50 years, May 17, 1949. Only a few people who knew him personally are still alive. A new generation are now the stockholders, yet they have had little exposure to the stories, testimonies and personal visits to the mine. Nearly all of the original stock that was bought is now in the hands of someone else, i.e., those who inherited it and know very little about the mine. Because of this phenomenon, this book has been compiled including stories, articles, publications, newspaper clippings, etc., pertaining to the events and personal accounts of those who knew this remarkable man. Most of the following accounts were written by people who were fascinated with the Dream Mine story. Some of these authors knew Bishop Coyle personally, some met him only once or twice, and some never knew him. Through the years, many stories have been told about the mine that have been misquoted, exaggerated, or are just plain untrue. Thus, this book is compiled with the hope that some of these events might be clarified and better understood. Chapter 1. Introduction. The purpose of wealth. And if ye seek the riches which it is the will of the Father to give unto you, ye shall be the richest of all people, for ye shall have the riches of eternity. And it must needs be that the riches of the earth are mine to give, but beware of pride lest ye become as the Nephites of old. D&C 38:39. Is it right or wrong to seek for temporal wealth? Perhaps the answer lies within one's purpose of attaining it. The scriptures are abundant with reasons for getting and not getting riches, such as, think of your brethren like unto yourselves, and be familiar with all and free with your substance, that they may be rich like unto you. But before ye seek for riches, seek ye for the kingdom of God. And after ye have obtained a hope in Christ ye shall obtain riches, if ye seek them. And ye will seek them for the intent to do good, to clothe the naked, and to feed the hungry, and to liberate the captive, and administer relief to the sick and the afflicted. Jacob 2:17-19. A little that a righteous man hath is better than the riches of many wicked. P.S. 37:16. He that trusteth in his riches shall fall. Prov. 11:28. Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues without right. Prov. 16:8. Labor not to be rich, cease from thine own wisdom. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings, they fly away as an eagle toward heaven. Prov. 23:4-5. Give me neither poverty nor riches, feed me with food convenient for me, lest I be full, and deny thee, and say, Who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor, and steal, and take the name of my God in vain. Prov. 38:9. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. Ec. 5:10. There is a sore evil which I have seen under the sun, namely, riches kept for the owners thereof to their hurt. Ec. 5:13. Beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. And he the rich man said, This will I do, I will pull down my barns, and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years, take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee, then whose shall those things be, which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself, and is not rich toward God. Luke 12:15, 18-21. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Matt. 6:19-21. He also that received seed among the thorns, is he that heareth the word, and the care of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, choke the word and he becometh unfruitful. Matt. 13:22. He is proud. Supposing that gain is godliness, from such withdraw thyself. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment let us be therewith content. Charge them that are rich in this world, that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. 1 Tim. 6:4-8, 17. Do not rich men oppress you, and draw you before the judgment seats? Do not they blaspheme that worthy name by the which ye are called? Jaws. 2:6-7. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries, that shall come upon you. Jaws. 5:1. But whoso hath his world's good, and seeth his brother have need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him? John 3:17. Very few times in the history of this world has everyone in a community shared their wealth. A great gap always exists between the poor and the rich, as Jesus said, ye have the poor always with you. Matt. 26:11. The problem is twofold: the poor are envious of the rich, and the rich love their wealth so much that they won't share it. A good example is when a young man came to Jesus asking for eternal life. Jesus told him to go and sell that thou hast, and give to the poor. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful. Matt. 19:21-22. It was after this experience that Jesus replied, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Matt. 19:24. This does not mean that all rich men will go to hell, neither does it mean that all poor people will go to heaven. The difficulty is finding a charitable rich man. Some say that wealth can be good or bad. But wealth has nothing to do with being good or bad, it's how it is used, and how people are influenced by it. Paul the Apostle said the love of money is the root of all evil. 1 Tim. 6:10. And he then added which, while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith. In other words, they were probably good until covetousness entered into their hearts. Obviously people can be poor or wealthy, and still be good or bad. Wealth provides a person with a chance to do more good than he could if he were poor. But most men have a tendency to seek temporal wealth, only to aggrandize themselves as the final objective. The prophet Joseph Smith explained to Oliver B. Huntington the correct view regarding the obtaining of riches. During the lifetime of Joseph Smith, someone asked him how it was that some men have no trouble to make money, and other men can get nothing ahead, work as they will. Some unforeseen event takes it as fast as they get more than they need for immediate use. He said that the one who was favored in this life with riches seemingly poured into his lap would have a debt to settle in the next life. The other man, who could get nothing ahead in this life, would find a large credit standing in his favor in the next world. I heard Joseph Smith say something like this: some people say that it is not right to seek to aggrandize one's own self, that self-aggrandizement is not a good principle, but it can be done permanently, justly and righteously in only one way, or upon only one plan, in order to be eternal in its durability. If any person will build up others and permanently aggrandize others, he in turn will be aggrandized eternally. That is the only principle or plan upon which it can be done and remain forever. Oliver B. Huntington Journal, page 19. Riches seem to be the god of this world, and a very powerful one too. They have power to do either good or evil, and more often than not they have the power to lead men to forget the true God of heaven and earth. The purpose and intent of the relief mine is to ultimately do good, to help the poor in a time of financial crisis, and to help build up the kingdom of God. The following stories help to emphasize such righteous intent. Chapter 2. Time in the Dream Mine. By Samuel W. Taylor. Samuel W. Taylor, son of John W. Taylor and grandson of John Taylor, was a longtime and valued friend of the compiler. He passed away on September 26, 1997, while this book was being compiled, and his personal association and witty correspondence will be greatly missed. Sam was a very prolific writer, approaching a variety of subjects in a most interesting and sometimes defending manner. One of his fascinating and informative articles was written about John Coyle and his dream mine, and was published in Esquire magazine. It is included in this chapter, preceded by a letter he wrote to me explaining how he came to write this story. Dear Ogden, November 22, 1993. I was surprised to find that I had a copy of Time in the Dream Mine, because I was in England as an Air Force correspondent at the time Esquire published the story. Maybe my brother Raymond saved the magazine for me, I dunno. How I came to write it: during basic training at Fort Lewis, Washington, I was selected, along with about 20 GIs from other outfits, to attend the ASTP officer training program at University of Utah. The ASTP program was a big operation. The entire field house was filled with double-decked bunks, and there was 100 washbowls along the south wall. When we arrived, however, the entire operation had been scrubbed, so it was 10 days of close order drill, then back to our outfits. While still in Salt Lake, Raymond drove up to say hello, and he told me the story of the dream mine. I got an overnight pass, and I went back with him, and that evening interviewed John Coyle. He was anything but impressive, stooped from hard labor, a scraggly mustache, rough work clothes. But when he began talking, wow! The guy could talk a bird out of a tree. After the interview, I sat up all night at Raymond's home and wrote the story. He took me back in time in the morning. When Esquire published the story, Raymond wrote that the church hailed it as the best thing ever done to prove that John Coyle was a complete phony, while the Dreamers hailed it as the best thing ever written to prove he was guided as a true prophet. That's a hard trick to pull off, and I guess I've never done it again. Sella, St. Time in the Dream Mine. By Samuel W. Taylor. For half a century, John Coyle, the prophet, has somehow persuaded sanguine stockholders that the bonanza is just around the corner. On the 17th of September, 1894, a party of 6 men climbed the face of a mountain east of Spanish Fork, Utah. The leader, John Coyle, selected a spot he had seen in a dream, and they started to dig. They did not find paying ore. Today, almost 50 years later, the dream mine is still in operation. Coyle has blasted tunnels and shafts totaling almost a mile and a half into the rock of the mountain. A $60,000 flotation mill of gleaming white concrete has been erected. No paying ore has been produced. According to impartial assays, the ore has been practically worthless. But operations continue. Yet this is no rich man's folly. John Coyle started digging a poor man. He is still a poor man. The mine has been financed entirely by hard-headed stockholders, who number today around 5,000, scattered over the entire United States. The stockholders are not at all perturbed by the lack of the usual incentives for investment. On the contrary, they are filled with an almost rabid enthusiasm. True, an occasional disgruntled dreamer, as dream mine stockholders are termed, may unload his holdings for from 2 to 4 bits a share. But the purchaser of such stock will not be a dyed-in-the-wool dreamer. Such a one wouldn't dream of buying stock, except from Coyle himself, at the unvarying par value of $1.50 per share. Inasmuch as the mine's only source of income is from the sale of new stock, it obviously would not help the cause to buy resold stock at however much of a bargain. The story of the dream mine is a good one, and it's too bad it can't be told yet. It can be, perhaps, in a few weeks. Big things are supposed to be breaking, but the time apparently hasn't arrived to reveal them. Scoffers say big things have been breaking with clock-like regularity for 49 years, but John Coyle avers that this time every problem is licked and every obstacle overcome. Another boom is on. The dream mine does produce a certain ore. Scoffers say it is worthless. Dreamers say it is practically priceless. On the face of it, it would seem the thing could be settled once and for all by an impartial assay. Indeed, such assays have been made, and according to them the ore is without value. This does not in the slightest deter Coyle and his dreamers, nor dampen their enthusiasm. Coyle simply claims, and his dreamers believe, that this ore is unusual, and that all the metals are burned out of it by ordinary methods of assay. John Coyle is now 79 years old, stooped from a lifetime of hard work. He lives at the base of the mountain in a modest white frame house set amid the scrub oak and sagebrush just below the magnificent mill that is a monument to his life's dream. He wears a faded blue shirt, dungarees supported by wide suspenders and worn farm shoes. His eyes are dimming now, but his hair, except for a scraggly mustache, is just beginning to gray. His face is curiously unlined. He sits in a rocking chair and talks in a low voice of crops, the labor situation, the war, people in the vicinity. He won't talk about the dream mine. Not yet. Nor for a few weeks. People have doubted him too long. He's determined to show him this time. Yes, he started it back in '94. And some people still doubt he's got the paying ore. He smiles slightly, and there is a change. His voice remains soft, but his eyes are no longer dim. His face is serene, no single line of doubt having formed in 49 years. The ore's there. Pure tungsten is making a filigree on the face of the vein, he says. You can pick it off with your fingers. From time to time enthusiasm has reached a fever pitch among dreamers as new metals were reported as found in the ore. Today, Coyle states, there are 33 metals in it, including gold, silver, platinum, and lead in breathtaking quantities. Scoffers hint that when Coyle needs money he discovers a new metal in the ore. Coyle explains that the big trouble is that his ore is too rich. All 33 metals have different melting points. Under ordinary smelting methods, he says, you'd lose most of them, they'd vaporize and go up the chimney. But he's got that licked. Never mind how. Just wait a few weeks. Then he'll have something to tell. He won't talk right now. But hasn't it been difficult to keep going all this while? Coyle smiles. Yes, he's had a fight of it. But, says he, they'll all come around begging to buy stock too late, when there won't be any to sell. He knows what'll happen. He saw it all from the beginning. A dream? Well, you can call it that, though in Utah people use another term. In Utah some people call it divine inspiration, and it is a matter of record that some extraordinarily rich mines have been discovered by this method. Coyle states simply, and without elaboration, that he went completely through the mine and explored the ore vein before the first pick was laid to the mountainside in 1894. He had been digging a while, following the strata in a slope towards the east, when a geologist came for a look. You'll never find anything on an east slope, the geologist said. Coyle just smiled and kept on digging. Presently, just as he had predicted, the slope switched to the west. Here his troubles began. Certain ones of the original party wanted to follow the slope straight back towards the west. Coyle knew he should go diagonally. There was an argument, and he closed down the mine. 2 years later, after handsome and humble apologies had been tendered several times, he continued the tunnel, diagonally. Coyle is a patient man. Since that time, there has been no question about who is boss. Meanwhile, the geologist was pestering again. He was concerned with what he termed the plight of innocent investors. He pointed out that there was no iron, no slate and no igneous rock, all of which should have been present. Coyle roamed the mountainside and found a huge slate bed. He found several acres of outcropping igneous rock. In the mine he pointed out a vein of iron. That's the wrong color for iron, the geologist said. Coyle shrugged and tested a random sample. It assayed 50% iron. It was the wrong color because it was burned, he explained simply. That means there was a fire in the earth. And that means there's metals. The iron is the mother and the igneous rock is the father, and the offspring is my ore. He doesn't know what part the slate plays. He'll leave that to the geologists. So they tried to stop him. Coyle was hauled into court. Arrayed as witnesses against him were a dozen and a half stockholders smarting as only men can who feel they've been fleeced. They had the sucker's rabid desire for revenge. With such witnesses, Coyle was doomed. He remained unperturbed. When the witnesses got on the stand, they changed their minds, he says. Instead of testifying against me, they began whooping it up for the dream mine. Case was dismissed. Note it would be from the start. He accepts this incident as a matter of course. He just knows he can't be licked. What caused the witnesses to have their faith restored his presence? There is no outward sign in the stooped figure in his faded work clothes to hint at his uncanny power to sway men. He is as mild as he is soft-spoken. He can listen as well as talk. He doesn't orate. He doesn't rant. He doesn't force his opinions on anyone. Yet he has kept the unshaken faith of thousands of dreamers for 49 years. He has had both church and state arrayed against him. At one time, 17 deputy marshals were hunting him. Yet he is still going strong, and, right now, he says, the dream mine is on the brink of the biggest boom of all. They did stop him once, back around 1914. For 6 years the dream mine was idle. No lines grew on Coyle's face. He knew things would straighten out, and they did, at least to his own satisfaction. When they did he renewed operations. When he needed money, he simply sold stock. Things were a bit tough at times. But about the time stockholders began wondering about dividends or muttering about court action, Coyle would somehow manage to find a new metal in the ore, or run into a sign ablaze, as it were, to show he was on the right trail. For instance, a hog's back in the rock formation of the tunnel. He had predicted it would be there, and it was. Again, a map of North America was revealed in a strategic spot. There was a right turn to the vein as predicted. Faults made perfect north and south walls to the tunnel for 100 yards or so, just as he'd said they would. John Coyle knew where he was going. At the proper time Coyle had started a tunnel straight into the mountainside some distance below the original diggings. A ditch had to be made as they went along to carry off the water. What water? Never mind, there'd be water. The workers grumbled about the ditch. It was a nuisance to make, and anybody knew there was no water in the mountain. No sign of water. They went 2,000 feet with no water. Coyle calmly ordered the ditch built foot by foot as the tunnel progressed. At 2,400 feet the water appeared and filled the ditch. Clear, pure, icy water, a priceless thing in the desert. Coyle was his own surveyor on this tunnel. He got back away onto a ridge and, clinging to a bush with one hand, sighted with his naked eye to get the thing started. Once going, he just went ahead without sighting. The tunnel is 3,400 feet long, and at the back end you can see daylight from the front. Pretty fair job, Coyle admits. The geologist who had influence in the state continued his opposition. Coyle, however, always knew what was going to happen. He was always one jump ahead. This baffled the geologist, who had no inkling that his secretary happened to be a dreamer. The state denied Coyle a license to sell stock. That should have stopped him cold. The sale of stock was his only source of income for operations. Coyle called in his board of directors and told them what to do. Coyle never has asked his directors to direct. They don't generally interfere, he explains. So he told them, issue me some stock. 50,000 shares of special stock. This was in his own name, his personal stock, and there was no law against a man selling his own stock. The dream mine continued operations. Coyle is a man given to predictions, and the number of things he has predicted that came to pass is astounding. One of his more outlandish predictions came years ago when, pointing across the sagebrush desert to a desolate spot, he said, "There'll be a big manufacturing plant right there someday." The place is isolated, on rocky ground above the irrigation level, far from human habitation. 2. The valley had hundreds of better sites. Came the war, and today a powder mill stands on the spot. Isolation is a prime requisite for a powder mill, and the location is ideal. Another prediction had to do with the geologist who continued to do his utmost to close down the dream mine. He wrote articles against it for the state press and made speeches. He had a high position and Coyle had none. Coyle's infinite patience became exhausted. The day will come, he declared to his stockholders, and anyone else within earshot, when that man will come to me and ask forgiveness. A short time later the geologist died. Coyle admits that even the most faithful dreamers sort of doubted him for a spell. They kind of wondered. But he didn't say anything. Didn't try to explain. Didn't try to worm out of it. He just bided his time, and sure enough, Coyle allows, the geologist appeared to him one night in spirit form. Apparently the man had gone just so far on the otherwise and couldn't get any further without asking forgiveness from John Coyle. "Sure, I forgave him," Coyle says. "I didn't want to cause him no trouble over there." And he adds, matter-of-factly, "Seems to me, they're more square on the other side." He didn't ask my forgiveness until he got there. Came the Depression. Remember? Nobody had a nickel. Nobody would invest. Mining was particularly hard hit. World-famous mines in the district were closing down or on the verge of it. Mining stock could hardly be given away. Things looked black for the dream mine. For 7 weeks Coyle couldn't meet the peril. Dreamers wanted returns. They wanted cash instead of promises. Coyle explained there was plenty of ore, but it was this special ore, with all these metals mixed up in it. You heat it and a black smoke comes off, all those metals burning up. There was no plant in existence that could handle it. "We've got to build our own plant," Coyle told his directors. They threw up their hands in horror. Coyle saw it was no use talking with them. "I was afraid to tell him," he admits. So without a word he started the flotation mill on his own hook. This was in July 1932, at the very bottom of the Depression. In November the mill was complete, and the $40,000 it had cost was paid off in cash. $20,000 worth of machinery was installed. "How?" Coyle smiles placidly. He isn't talking now. "Not yet," says he. "It's not the time." He built the mill in typical Coyle fashion. When construction was underway and things were too far along to recall, the directors demanded an architect. The builder refused to do another tap without blueprints. "I didn't need no blueprints," Coyle says. "I knowed what I wanted." But he did compromise. He hired an architect. The builder, meanwhile, agreed to go on while awaiting finished specifications. By the time the first section was done, the architect came around with the blueprints for it, Coyle says, grinning. He, meanwhile, had started on the next section, and the architect hastened to catch up. How much influence the architect actually had might be impossible to say, but the finished mill is truly magnificent. It looks like no other flotation mill in the world. Gleaming white, with modernistic horizontal window lines, it appears to be an apartment house, a rich man's castle or a skyscraper built against the mountain. Coyle is justly proud of it. However, there was a minor flaw in the mill. It couldn't process the ore. Disappointment? There's a time for all things, Coyle avers placidly. He is not to be rushed. Certain other ore had to be found to mix with the original ore to make it workable. 2. The mine is not merely a mine. It is a means of saving Utah in time of famine and is sometimes called the relief mine. When the time comes, it will produce wealth to buy large stores of essential foods and supplies. And they, the ones who have been against him all these 49 years, they'll be saved along with the rest. The very leaders of the opposition will be in dire straits. The world will be against them. They'll need help badly. And Coyle confidently asserts that he will be the man to lend a hand when the time comes. When, if ever, the promised time comes, a dreamer will be independent on 100 shares of stock. It's not much of an investment for lifetime security, $150. Of course, some dreamers would like more than security, and they invest in a few extra shares. Some have their life savings tied up in it. It is not uncommon for a dreamer to make an occasional outright donation for the cause. It is a cause. To utter the words dream mine in any local gathering is to split the group immediately into two factions, for and against. You either believe or you don't. And the dream mine is more than a local affair. In traveling in any of the intermountain states, if a man lets it be known he's from Spanish Fork, he'll be asked about the dream mine. Or he can occasionally run into the same question in Los Angeles or New York. And all the dreamers know is that the time is near. They meet each Thursday night at Coyle's house set below the stucco mill and listen to their leader. They leave burning with enthusiasm. Coyle, to them, is a great leader. For 49 years he has made people believe in him and his dream. Few prophets have held disciples that long. While being denounced by the highest-ranking officials of the territory, he has continued to operate his mine on the hard-earned cash of the faithful. The number of dreamers grows with the years. Each season sees new dreamers added to the fold. Each disappointment adds new converts. Each delay and unexpected expenses cause for a boom. The dreamers are impatient to provide what is necessary to hasten the great day. And the time now is near. That it has been near week by week, for almost half a century, has no bearing on the case. This time it's the real thing. The very last obstacle has been overcome, right now. This very week. Coyle sits in his rocker, a slight old gentleman of 79. He sits there in his working clothes and rocks tranquilly. He's sorry. He can't talk. He's just sort of rambled tonight, jumping around purposely, so you wouldn't get the story. But pretty soon he'll be ready to talk. Right away. Big things are now in the offing. The time is very short. But don't mention this latest development, he says with a calm assurance that has won him many followers. It's a sure thing this time, but they've been against me too long. I don't want to say a word until the right time. And then he shakes your hand good night, and his eyes are dim again. The story of the dream mine will be a good one when John Coyle gets ready to tell it. Esquire, May 1944, beginning with page 101. Chapter 3. The Story of the Dream Mine. By C.F. Waite. The next story of the mine, by C.F. Waite, has been passed around for many years and is one of the most accurate and detailed accounts of the physical description and workings of the mine and the historical events surrounding it. The Story of the Dream Mine. By C.F. Waite. The first time I ever heard of the dream mine, it was told to me by Andrew Pierce, who lived on the same block as I in Springville, Utah. I was very much interested in what he told me, as he pointed out the place on the mountain where the dream mine is, as I had been shown a rich gold mine in that very mountain while I was on a mission in the southern states a few years previously. I talked this information over with my brothers, and we arranged to go see Brother John H. Coyle, the founder of the mine, who lived in the Leland Ward about 2 miles west of Spanish Fork. Upon our arrival at Spanish Fork, we learned that Brother Coyle was up at the mine, so we went up to the mine, which is located about 3 miles east of Salem, Utah. We were traveling in a double-seated buggy. We arrived at the mine in the middle of the afternoon in the fall of about the year 1909. We climbed to the top of Knob Hill, which extends about halfway to the top of the mountain, and went down the ladder into the mine to the number 7 station. At the number 1 station, which is 250 feet inside the mountain, We saw William Pierce turning the hand blower pumping air down into the mine. There were about 7 or 8 more visitors at the number 7 station. Brother Coyle and Frank Woodward were working about 12 feet below us. They were hunting for the leader which was to guide them down the number 7 run, which was to be over 100 feet straight down. I could tell which of the two was Brother Coyle, although I had never seen either of them before, and no one indicated which man was he. We watched them work about a half hour until the shift was over. Then we were introduced to them. We all came up out of the mine, and we went down the mountain and got into our buggy for the homeward journey. During the 4 miles we traveled to the place where Brother Coyle turned off to go to Leland, he told us many great and marvelous things pertaining to the mine. We made arrangements to go another day and visit Brother Coyle at his home when he told us the story of the mine. The story, as nearly as I can remember it, is as follows. Brother Coyle said when he was a young man, the brethren in the church used to preach about getting a testimony of the gospel. At this time he was married and had 1 or 2 children, and on one occasion, when the brethren were preaching about getting a testimony of the gospel, he turned to his wife and said, I don't believe a word of it." He went on to say that he had prayed many times for a testimony of the gospel and said that he never had got one. Just at that moment the speaker said, "Now if you do not get a testimony of the gospel, when you pray for it, it is because you have not repented and made all things right between you and your brethren and the Lord." Brother Coyle said to his wife, "Oh, that is different. I have never heard them preach it that way before." He said he determined within his mind that a few disagreeable things that existed between him and a few of his friends must be settled and straightened out. He went and saw all of these friends and settled all their differences. That night he went out into the willows to pray for a testimony of the gospel and told the Lord that he had straightened up all of his differences and asked to be forgiven by the Lord also. He prayed long and earnestly for a testimony of the gospel. Brother Coyle's words were very plain and simple, as his father had been killed in a rock quarry when he was 9 years of age, and he had had little opportunity for school privileges. After finishing his prayer, he got up off his knees and said he didn't feel a bit different than when he started to pray. He went into the house somewhat disappointed. In those days Brother Coyle had a few cattle on his farm, one of which, a red heifer, he had not been able to find. He had hunted the fields for some 3 weeks without finding his red heifer and had given up hope of finding her, thinking that she was stolen or dead. That night he had a dream. In this dream he saw his red heifer in a field down below the Union Pacific Railroad track. The heifer was standing in Willie Wood's field facing east. One horn was knocked down and was interfering with her eye, causing the eye to run. He was shown that he was to go down the next morning, and just after the passenger train came by, he was to cross over the track and go into the field, and there he would find the heifer as he had been shown in the dream. In the dream it was said to him, "Will this be a testimony unto you that the gospel of Jesus Christ is true?" He answered, "Yes." This finishes the dream. The next morning he told his wife the dream and said, "I'm going down there and get my heifer. I know she is there for I saw her." His wife laughed at him, as she didn't have much confidence in his dream. She said, "John, you've hunted those fields over and over, and if your heifer had been there, you would have found her." But John said, "I'm going down there and get her." He saddled his horse and waited a little while so that he would get down to the track about 10 o'clock when the train passed by. He went out into the field, and there was his heifer exactly as he had been shown. He went all the way around the heifer while she stood there, saw the brand, and marveled at the wonderful circumstances. He drove the heifer out of the field and started up the road toward home. The heifer did not try to go into any other field or on any other road, but went right along nicely all the way home. While he was on the way home behind the heifer, he prayed to the Lord with much joy and thanksgiving in his heart, and made a covenant with the Lord that if the Lord would give him dreams and visions from time to help him on his way, he would serve the Lord all the days of his life. Some time after this, while he was plowing in his field, a voice spoke to him saying, "Would you go on a mission if you were called?" Brother Coyle spoke right out loud and said, "Yes." He stopped his team in the middle of the field and looked to see who had spoken to him, and there was not a soul visible in that whole 10-acre field. This was very remarkable, and when he had driven to the place nearest his house, he tied up his team and went into the house and said to his wife, "I'm going on a mission." As she turned and looked at him, she said, "Why, John, how can you go on a mission? You haven't got $1 to your name." He said, "I know it, but I'm going anyway." I just promised I'd go." He then related the incident of hearing the voice speak to him. Some few weeks after this, some members of the bishopric came to see him about going on a mission. When they asked him if he would go on a mission, they were greatly astonished at his unhesitating answer, "Yes." They said, "We didn't think you were able to go on a mission, but we felt constrained to come and see you about it." They sent his name to the church, and about 3 weeks later, he got a call from Box B, which was the church's mailing address. The call said, "If you accept this call to go on a mission, be ready in about 3 weeks to go to the Southern States Mission." He told his wife to answer the letter and tell the church authorities that he would be ready to go. She refused to answer it because she didn't see how it was possible for him to go. His sister was there at the time visiting, and she said, "I'll answer it, John." And he said, "All right, _LECT, and she did so. Brother Coyle tried every way during that 3 weeks to get means to go on his mission. 3 days before the time expired he did not have $1. At this time it was manifested to him that he could butcher 2 of his steers and obtain some money in that manner by selling them by the quarter. It was also manifested to him that some of the Icelanders who lived at Spanish Fork whom he had befriended against the slurs and jeers of other men would buy a quarter of beef each. He butchered a beef and took it uptown and sold all 4 quarters to these Icelanders and got orders for 4 more quarters from others of the group. They were glad to buy from him because he had befriended them in time of need and also to help him on his mission. Thus he was prepared the very last day to get to his mission field, leaving his family of 2 or 3 very small children in the hands of the Lord to get along the best they could. He arrived at the Southern States Mission, which was presided over at that time by J. Golden Kimball. While in the mission field, Elder Coyle had some very remarkable dreams and manifestations. On one occasion, while staying at the home of a good friend who had not yet joined the church of the elders, he had a remarkable dream. He was shown 2 elders staying that night at a home a few miles distance. He saw that a mob gathered to mob the elders. The elders fled from this home in the darkness of the night and made their way to the home of another friend. The mob followed and chased them out of that home, throwing rocks and such things as they had at the elders as they ran. They knocked the hat off one of the elders, which he did not recover, and hit one of them on the ear with a rock, which made it bleed very freely. He saw the elders flee toward the place where he and his companion were sleeping. He saw them come to the house all excited and nearly given out and shout, "Get up, the mob is coming, get up and flee for your lives." He saw that they were not to go away from that home. They were to stay regardless of the mob. He saw the mob composed of 200 or 300 gather and surround the house. They did not burst into the house or cause any trouble, and he saw himself and his companion get up and go downstairs. They were sleeping in the attic, and the man of the house, fortified with his gun, declared that the mob would not take the elders unless it was over his dead body. As they did not make any special attempt to disturb Elder Coyle, he saw that he went outdoors in his shirt sleeves to see what was going on. It appeared as though the mob was divided, as some of the men did not think that they should commit murder. While they were discussing their plan of procedure, he saw a woman stop out in front of the mob. This woman commenced to tell the mob of their wicked, devilish intentions. She told them of their wickedness and asked them to disperse and leave the elders alone, referring to the judgments that would come on them for such sin. This seemed to cause a greater division among them, and soon they commenced to slink away until finally they all left without any disturbance. No sooner had the dream finished than they were awakened by these 2 elders who came shouting, "Get up, the mob is coming." In a moment Elder Coyle's companion jumped out of bed and was dressed in a very short time, and he all the time was saying to Elder Coyle, hurry up, or we'll be mobbed." Elder Coyle threw his feet out of bed and sat on the edge of the bed, very little concerned and in no hurry at all. He said, "Hold on a minute now here, I want to tell you something." By this time the other elders had come into the house and were wondering why they didn't get up and run for their lives. Elder Coyle related this dream to them, which they acknowledged in detail. Then he said, "Now if all of that has happened exactly as I saw it and have told you, then the rest will happen." By this time the mob was surrounding the house. Elder Coyle dressed and went downstairs, and sure enough, there was the mob. After waiting a few minutes, Elder Coyle went outside bareheaded and in his shirt sleeves and saw and heard the very things that were shown to him in his dream, even to the woman that gave those men a talking to that they had never had before. In his words, she sure did lay down the law to them. On another occasion there was a conference appointed by President Kimball, and the saints gathered to attend this conference. Elder Coyle had a dream the night before wherein he saw a mob gather with the intention of getting President Kimball. The plan was to get him for no good purpose, but they did not intend to mob the others. Elder Coyle saw that it would be the right thing for President Kimball not to appear at that meeting, and that the mob would be disappointed and not do anything further because their plans would be frustrated. Elder Coyle saw that the mob came and looked in at the windows and looked all around to find that long, lean, red-headed President Kimball, for that was the way they spoke of him. When they were not able to find him, they went away. Elder Coyle told President Kimball this dream and suggested that he make himself scarce during that meeting, which he did. The mob came during the meeting but was greatly disappointed that they were not able to find President Kimball. They looked in at the door and the windows and all around the building but couldn't find him and then went their way. President Kimball had probably heard of other instances concerning Elder Coyle's dreams and decided it would be wise to take notice. There were a number of other instances similar to these which happened in the mission field. His life and the lives of others were undoubtedly preserved through his divine dreams and manifestations. Suffice it to say that Elder Coyle fulfilled a very good and important mission. While in the mission field, he received a letter from his wife stating that the Rio Grande Railroad was surveying land right through the middle of his farm, which would practically ruin most of his farm. Elder Coyle was much concerned about this. He made it a matter of prayer and asked the Lord to cause them to change their survey. He had a dream wherein he saw that the surveyors would change the survey and cut across the corner of his farm, cutting off about 2 acres of his farm. In the dream it was said to him, "You are no better to have the railroad go through your farm than to go through your neighbors' farms," but this change would not injure him so severely. He immediately wrote a letter to his wife telling her the dream, stating that they would change their survey and that it would cut off the northwest corner of his farm. At that time the surveyors had already made a new survey placing their railroad line exactly where Elder Coyle saw it would go. Before Elder Coyle's letter reached his wife, she had already written to him stating that they had changed their survey and had cut off about 2 acres of the northwest corner of his farm. Each letter passed the other in transit. Elder Coyle rejoiced that they had changed their survey as shown to him, as he said it would have hurt him worse than any other farm on the line. This mission, in connection with other experiences given to him, prepared him to be chosen of the Lord to perform another mission, that which pertained to temporal affairs. It was on the night of September 3, 1894, that a messenger came to him in a dream telling him of a rich gold mine that was in the mountain directly east of Salem, Utah. The messenger told him the purpose of the mine would be to bring relief to the Lord's faithful people at a time when great tribulation and distress would be in the land. The mine was to be called the Relief Mine. He told him of a period of 4 years of famine and explained that the first 2 years the saints would be able to get by, but the third and fourth years they would have nothing to eat unless it was prepared and stored up against that time. Then there would be 2 more years which would be a recovery period. The messenger explained that there would be a winter of heavy snow and big snow drifts, after which there would be a mild open winter, but whether that winter was to follow immediately or whether some other winters would be in between, he never explained. However, immediately following the mild open winter, there would be a hot dry summer. The crops would come up in the spring, and there would be considerable moisture, and the crops would be glorious. That is the word Bishop used to use. He saw the wheat would grow up and head out beautifully, and the irrigated wheat would mature, but the dry land wheat would not have enough moisture to fill out. By harvest time the heads would curl over in a sort of crescent shape. This was shown to him in another dream wherein he saw he went into the wheat fields when they were binding the grain, which looked like it would be a splendid crop. He picked up a bundle of wheat by the binding twine, and the head's end of the bundle came up with the butt end of the bundle hanging down because it was heavier. Realizing that the head end should have gone down if there had been good wheat in it, he examined the heads of wheat by crushing them in his hands to bring out the kernels. He found that the wheat was terribly shrunken and not fit for food. He was told by the messenger that this condition would bring about a shortage of food during the first year of harvest. The second year, he was shown, would be the same, only much less food raised. Still, the irrigated grain would be good. He was told we would need to store up the first and second year's grain to supply food for the third and fourth years. The third year the shortage would be so great that there would hardly be anything raised for food. The fourth year they would not be able to raise anything for food. He was shown in another dream that during the fourth year there would be plenty of money to buy food, and he with others went up and down throughout the country seeking to buy food, and they could not buy any. Any people who had a little food would not sell it at any price. During this time of famine there would be no rain to do any good. He saw the clouds would come up, and it would look like it was going to rain, but a wind would come up and blow the clouds away. And if there was any rain at all, it was just a few drops which were not sufficient to do any good. The purpose of the mine was to build store bins and store up wheat and other foods like Joseph of old, who was sold into Egypt. He saw the rains would come in the 5th year, and they would be forced to spare a little wheat for seed, but would be sorely pressed to raise enough to eat during the 5th year and save enough for seed for the 6th year. The rains continued to come, the crops grew, and at the harvest time of the 6th year they would have enough food to carry on. He was told by the messenger that there would be a great crash in the land before the period of famine began. This crash would be brought about by prices going up, which condition was illustrated to him as being like a person on high stilts. When prices became extremely high, something happened in the land like knocking the stilts from under the person, and down came everything. Businesses closed down, labor was thrown out of work, people were hungry, and great tribulations were in the land. He saw that the best place to live and to work would be at the mine. Those who worked there would be the best off. He was told by the messenger that the church program to care for the poor would all be used up during the 1st and 2nd years of famine, that the mine would bring relief during the 3rd year and would carry on the relief from the 3rd year on. The messenger gave him to understand that he was chosen to bring about this work of the development of the mine and awaited his decision to accept it or not. Brother Coyle began to explain that he was not able to do that work by saying, "I don't know how to take up a claim, or drill a round of holes or blast them. I don't have any money, and I don't see how I ever could accomplish that work." The messenger replied, "If you will be true and faithful to the instructions given you, I will see that men and money come to your assistance." Still, Brother Coyle was not willing to accept the mission. He was a very successful farmer and said, "I'm a farmer, and I love farming, and I don't know anything about mining." He had never been in a mine in his life, having refused many times to go in the mines at Tintic when he was freighting butter and eggs, etc., to the Tintic mining district. At this time Coyle's neighbor was digging an artesian well, the first well that was attempted in that part of the country. The messenger said, "Your neighbor is digging a well. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock noon he will strike water. The well will be a glorious success. They will take up their machinery and leave during the afternoon, having fully accomplished that work." He continued by saying, "If that all happens tomorrow as I have told you, will that be sufficient evidence and testimony to you that you will make just as glorious success of the mine by being obedient to the instructions given to you?" Brother Coyle answered, "Yes, if that happens tomorrow, I will accept of the mine mission." The messenger said, "You have a neighbor friend by the name of Joseph Brockbank whom you are to take with you when you go up on the mountain to start the mine." The messenger explained that Mr. Brockbank would be his doubting Thomas, but if he would be very persistent, Mr. Brockbank would finally concede and go with him upon the mountain. Then the messenger said, "Now come with me." He was taken in the spirit upon the mountain and was shown the mountain, the topography of the mountain where he was to commence digging. The messenger said, "Now dig a foot and a half, and you will find a black leader which he was to follow straight into the mountain for 40 feet. Then the leader would turn to the right and go to the right another 40 feet. Then the leader would turn down, and they were to follow it." Coyle and the messenger in the spirit went right into the mountain and saw these conditions and followed the leader down. The leader in the beginning was about an inch thick and black. They followed straight down until they came to a little ridge or bulge which seemed to turn over and turned them off in an angle to the right, the leader going off on an incline of about 20 degrees down. This they followed for nearly 200 feet, exact distances not being given to Brother Coyle. Then they came to where they went almost straight down. The messenger explained that they must sidestep far enough to the right, far enough to put in a windlass station which he called number 1. This went down by putting in ladders on just a little incline to the right for about 50 feet, when he would come to a bench that was about 4 feet wide and flat, then turning down about 5 feet, where they were to put in station number 2. He was shown how to put in the station, setting in timbers and wedging them in solidly. The number 2 was to go almost straight down, dipping a little bit to the right of the station. This, he estimated to be between 75 and 100 feet, which later proved to be 85 feet. At the bottom of number 2 run, where they were to put in the number 3 station, he was shown a global wall which Coyle called a belly roll, which extended about 5 feet long and wide. It was curved like a portion of a globe and was smooth. Here they sidestepped to the right a little bit for protection from above and put in the number 3 station. Right here the messenger explained that this rock was low-grade ore, but they were not to take it out for ore. When they arrived at this place in the digging, Coyle had this rock assayed, and it went $3 a ton in gold. The number 3 run was to be practically perpendicular. He estimated it about 100 feet. Here there was to be the number 4 station, and the formation was to change from a light grayish color, from number 1 to number 4, to a darker and reddish formation entirely different. The leader was to be red, and all the way up to 4 inches wide. There was to be a hanging wall and a foot wall which were to dip off to the east, and which would come within about 3 feet of each other for a rod or more in what was called the pinch. Then the hanging wall disappeared and the drift would open up big. This run was to be more than 100 feet. At the bottom of number 4 run, they were to move to the right far enough to put in a station completely protected from the number 4 run. Then they were to go down on a very slight incline to the east a short distance which afterward proved to be 35 feet. Then they were to move to the right a similar distance on the level, the leader still being of a reddish color, where they were to put a number 6 station. This was to go down a rod or so with an incline to the east. Then they would come to a reddish wall standing perpendicular, but sloping at the left, and down on about a 15% grade. It was to be a dark hanging wall and foot wall part of the way. These walls were about 4 feet apart, with the side wall gradually giving out or disappearing. This distance appeared to be somewhere around 50 feet, where they were to put a number 7 station. He was shown by the messenger that at this point the leader turned straight down, and that it would be no thicker than a table knife blade, and you will need to hunt around to find it. The reason for this hunting for the leader proved to be because of some discord which existed among the workers when they had dug down to that place. They continued down number 7 run about 100 feet, where was to be number 8 station. Here the leader would still be hard to find, and he saw in hunting the leader, they would go down in 2 or 3 places a little ways and have to fill them up because they would not have the right place. They were to go straight down on number 8 run a rod or so and strike a foot wall going on an incline to the east. This was all to get flatter as they went down this run, and as they proceeded down this run, they were to find the hanging wall, which was 5 or 6 feet from the foot wall but would not continue all the way. This run was to bear a little bit to the right as they went down, becoming quite flat at the bottom. At the end of number 8 run there was to be a fissure coming across the shaft which was to make a wall going straight down about 1 foot, where the formation was to change from a dark slightly blocky line to a light creamy colored short rock. For no 8 station they were to go straight down about 50 feet, where they would come to a large black leader about 2 feet thick, which would drift off to the east about a 20-degree angle down. But here the messenger explained that before they drifted off they would have to continue straight down at least another 50 feet and then come up out of there and follow this black leader on the incline to the east. He never explained why they were to do that, and it remained a mystery to Brother Coyle until after all this work was accomplished. This black leader was to be soft, so that you could squeeze it in your hand like a lump of mud. He was shown that there would be a black hanging wall and a black wall about 4 feet apart which they were to go down in between at a very definite direction to the east, which was given to him to understand without any figures or mechanical aid. He was to go down in between these black walls for about 50 feet, when he would come to a side wall on the left, which he called the north wall. This wall was to be smooth and black so that you could see your face in it, similar to a mirror. It was to come in on the left or north side of the shaft, and they were to follow down this north wall down on the incline. The hanging wall would fade out before the foot wall. The north wall was to be practically perpendicular for some distance and would gradually crowd us a very little bit to the right and would also begin to tip back at the top and lean a little bit away from the incline shaft. The black leader continued on at the top of the north wall. This No. 10 run on the incline was somewhere between 200 and 300 feet. Then they were to move off to the right the full distance of the shaft and put in the number 11 station. Here they were to find 4 walls top, bottom, and each side, which he described as a box. This is as far as they have dug in this part of the mine, having dug 4 or 5 feet in this box. They were to go down inside the box about on a 20-degree slope to the east, down until they came to the turndown, which distance was not manifested. This turndown was to be designated by about a dozen different conditions in the formation. There was to be a low dark foot wall on the right-hand side and a high hanging wall on the left side opposite the low foot wall. There was to be a fissure coming across the bottom of the drift going forward on an angle from left to right. This fissure would make a wall dipping back over to the west and also to be of white rock and 2 or 3 inches thick. There was to be a white fissure standing perpendicular in the face of the drift about an inch or 2 wide. The turndown was to be station number 12. in the turndown, was to be soft low-grade ore which he designated as the soft ore. This would be easy digging, and the messenger pointed out how they would need to be very careful in digging here, otherwise they might have to put in a few timbers. But if they were careful, they would not have to timber it. They were to follow down the west wall which would dip back slightly to the west and get rotten and disappear. This run appeared to be more than 100 feet. Then they would come to the cap rock. The cap rock was an exceedingly hard rock which was to be somewhere around 3 feet thick, having a light grayish color, which encased the rich gold ore. This was explained to be like the top of a chimney covered over with a hard cap which Coyle referred to as the capping. This No. 12 run was to be a fine creamy white colored gravel or rock reminding Coyle of the small gravel in a red ant bed, and he referred to it as the ant gravel. This cap rock was so hard that they felt around to find a soft place, but could not find one, and they almost despaired of getting through this capping. But when they did get through, they came into a chimney of rich gold ore, which went on an incline to the east for nearly 100 feet, when they came to 9 rooms which were already dug out. These 9 rooms were dug out east and west, and were paralleling each other going south with some 3 or 4 feet of rich gold ore between the rooms supporting the ground. The rooms were about a rod wide and several rods long. The gold ore was so rich that it reminded Coyle of the red and white stripes in the American flag, the gold ore being in the white rock. He was shown a tunnel that came into the mountain to this rich ore, but was told not to come into the ore through that tunnel, but he must dig his way in as he was shown. Later on, he was shown another tunnel which he was to dig into the rich ore. Coyle has told me on different occasions that if the Lord would let him, he could get into the rich ore in 3 weeks' time, but he was not permitted to open that tunnel at that time. He was shown various things which were in the old tunnel, some of which he told me would prove the Book of Mormon to be true. He was reluctant to tell us very much about those things at that time. When we got down into the 9 rooms in the spirit with the messenger, he looked to the east for a long distance, and also to the south for a long distance, and asked the messenger, "How far does this rich ore go?" The messenger did not tell him any distance, but said, "This ore will be here for you, and your children's children for many generations, and they will never be able to dig it all out." He further stated that this was the richest gold mine that ever would be discovered. As he came out of the mine through the old tunnel, he saw some crockery pots filled with precious things, some of which he understood were Nephite coins, but did not examine any of them. He also saw a human skeleton near the mouth of the tunnel as he came out of the mountain and the messenger disappeared. These 12 stations, the capping, the chimney incline, the 9 rooms in the old tunnel comprise the information first given by the messenger and are known as the older upper workings. The morning after this eventful dream vision, Brother Coyle told his wife the story of the dream as he called it. She said, "Well, John, you know nothing like that will ever come to us. We have to work for everything we have." And she discredited the dream. It was just too big for her to believe. Still, she was willing to cooperate with him in any and all things he decided to do. He said to his wife, "Today I'm going down to the lower field to work. I want you to watch and see if they get water in the neighbor's well today at 12 o'clock, as I won't be back home until evening." She paid little attention to what he said and did not notice the work on the well, but all at once she heard shouting and yelling and went to the door to see what was the matter, and she saw the water flowing up through the rigging and saw them swinging their hats and heard them yelling for joy. She looked at the clock, and it was just 12 o'clock noon. That evening when Coyle came home, she went out with a big smile on her face and opened the front gate for him to drive in, a thing she never did before, and he wondered what she was laughing at. He looked down at his clothes to see if there was anything wrong with them, and then looked up inquiringly. She turned her head and looked toward the well, and then Coyle looked toward the well. The water was flowing strongly through the 2-inch pipe, shooting water several feet from the well. He put up his team, came into the house, and said, "I have got to go get Joseph Brockbank and go up on the hill." The next morning, September 4, 1894, he rode on his horse to Brockbank's and told him the whole story. Brockbank just laughed at him and said he was crazy, or words to that effect. He stayed with him and rehearsed with him many things time and time again, and finally Brockbank said, "Well, I see that I have got to go with you, or I'll never get rid of you." So he said, "Tie your horse up to the shed, and we will get into my buggy," and away they went to the mountain some 6 or 7 miles away. When they got up to the foothills approaching from the north side of Knob Hill, they came to a gully that the water had washed out, and they could not drive across it. Coyle had told Brockbank that they should go around to the south side of Nob Hill, but not being able to cross this washout, Brockbank said, "If I turn around, I'll go home, I will not go any further." Coyle said, "We can go up from this side, but I don't see anything here that is familiar," as he had not been shown the north side of Nob Hill at that time. They unhitched the horses and proceeded to climb up the mountain. They had reached nearly the Nob Hill saddle and Brockbank was so tired he would not go any further and sat down. Coyle said, "Well, you wait here until I go up to the top of the saddle," which he did. When he had got over the ridge a little way, he saw a light spot right under a little green bush. He came back to where he could see Brockbank and yelled to him, "Come on up, here it is." When Brockbank arrived at the ridge and got around to this place, Coyle said, waving his arm in a semicircle, "Can you see anything different over in this direction?" indicating where the light spot was. Brockbank said, "Yes, I can see a light spot over there probably 100 feet. He said that it looked like it was lit up like there was a powerful light glowing. Coyle handed him the pick and said, "Can you take this pick and strike it up in the middle of this light spot?" He said, "Yes," and they proceeded to go over there, whereupon Brockbank struck the pick up right in the center of the light spot. Coyle said, "That is exactly where I could see the light," and further stated, "We will dig in here 1.5 feet, and if we don't find the black leader, we will go home. There is nothing to it." Incidentally, the ground in that particular wash was of a creamy clay color. They proceeded to dig, and sure enough, when they had dug 1.5 feet, they found a black leader about 1 inch thick. They dug in 2 or 3 feet along this leader, Brockbank becoming quite enthusiastic about it. They took some of the leader and it assayed $1 in gold. After covering up the hole they had dug, they joyously took their journey homeward. This word went from friend to friend until they got a small group of men, including Frank Woodward, who has had considerable experience in mining. Coyle and Woodward went up to the mountain and took up about 10 claims and had them recorded. The messenger had told Coyle that the ore was deep down in the hill and that they would need to work a little at a time and during the winter as they were able, and not pursue the work at first beyond their ability to do it. They worked 3 months during the winter time each winter for several years. They dug in the 40 feet to the east and the 40 feet to the south and went down into the Bulger turnover. Here Frank Woodward wanted to go with the turnover into the mountain and said every mining man would follow this turnover. Coyle told them that he was shown to go to the right on an incline. There arose a disputation and Coyle finally said, "Well, you fellows can go any way you want to, but I won't work with you until you are willing to go the way that was shown to me." So Coyle did not come up on the hill for a long time, and the others worked down in there, and they wound around until they practically dug out a big letter S. They finally got lost and went to Coyle and said, "Well, we got lost. We gave up. We are ready now to go where you say." Then Coyle started down the way that was shown, and they followed on down to the number 1 station. From here down our course was mostly downward. They followed the program outlined by the messenger very definitely. In fact, they could not make progress whenever they got off the track or off the leader which they were to follow. There were many very interesting incidents that occurred from time to time in their work. One in particular I might mention was when they had just begun to dig down from number 1 station. Frank Woodward was in charge of the visit, and while he was on no. 1 alone, he said a little dark lemonite appeared to him and told him, "This is the beginning of the TURNDOWN," and Frank understood the little dark lemonite to mean the turn down to the Cap Rock. This lemonite spirit came to mislead Frank and get him off the track, as he told him he was to look for the wall that would tip back to the west, whereas the true program was to have the wall lean toward the east. Mr. Woodward was influenced very much by the instruction the little dark lemonite gave him, and Coyle was kept very busy keeping them on the right way. Suffice it to say that they did follow the definitely directed course. When they got down to the number 6 station, June Pierce was drilling. Coyle explained carefully the exact direction toward the east they were to go toward to hit the wall that would turn them to the left. Coyle saw in a dream that June was bearing too far to the right and that he must go up on the hill and put June back on the course toward the left. He arrived up on Nob Hill at the cabin about noon. The first thing he said to June was, "June, you are going too far to the right." June said, "How do you know? You have not been up here for more than a week." "Well, I saw you in here last night, and you are going too far to the right." They went down the mine and the bishop showed him wherein they were going too far to the right. Had June gone the width of the incline shaft, he would have missed the wall entirely. Another interesting incident happened as they went down on the number 8 run. After going straight down for 12 feet looking for the footwall which would turn them to the east on an incline, Frank Woodward was very much interested in a little spot on the west side. He dug in there a little way and told the men that this was the right way to go as that looked very promising from a mining standpoint. He persuaded the men to accept of his design to dig in there a ways, saying, "We must not let Johnny know anything about it," meaning Coyle. They had a general understanding to that effect. So they worked putting in a round or two of holes in the place and covering up the place with boards so that Coyle would not know anything about it. About that time Coyle had a dream wherein he was shown exactly what they were doing. He saddled his gray mare and went up to the mine, arriving there as usual about noon. He said to Woodward, "Frank, what are you doing back behind the ladder on the west side there?" Frank decided to play innocent and ignorant and said, "Oh, nothing," trying to sidetrack Coyle. Coyle said, "Yes, you are." Woodward said, "Okay, ask these men." There was not one of them that would admit it. Coyle said, "I saw that you are going in the wrong direction behind the ladder on the west side, and that there were 6 of you implicated in it." So they went down the mine and Coyle went behind the ladder, threw the boards off the hole, and exposed their doings. They did not have much to say about it, but years later 2 of the men told Coyle the whole story, and there were 6 of them implicated in it. When they got down to number 9 station, the formation changed color from a dark, rather blocky lime to a light creamy colored broken up formation. As they threw this rock over the dump, it turned a very light color. This was what they were expecting, and Coyle always told them the dump would get a very light color, after which it was to get dark again. While going down number 9 run about 50 feet, he told them that they were to come into the black. As I was working in the mine at that time, we were continually asking, "When are we going to find the black?" as this light-colored short rock was very hard to drill in as the drill hole would keep caving in. We made very slow progress. Finally we came to the black, which was a fissure about 2 feet wide tipping off to the east on about a 20-degree angle. After digging down another 50 feet, we came up and put in the number 10 station, where the big black leader was. As we began digging down in this big black leader of the 20-degree incline, we kept pestering Coyle to let us throw the muck down the 50-foot hole we came up out of. Coyle would not consent to do this at first, but he didn't know what the hole was dug for, and finally we persuaded him to let us fill it up. He said, "Well, if you do, you may have to dig it out again." But we were willing to concede to most anything to keep from windlassing the muck to the surface from this number 10 station. While sitting on this station, Coyle was telling me about the beautiful north wall, which would come in on the north side of this number 10 run. It would be black and slick and very shiny. This was so much different from any other place we had found that it looked almost impossible of fulfillment. I said to Coyle, "If we find that black wall just as you have described it, I will be well satisfied that we will find all the rest of them." Coyle reassured me that we would get the north wall exactly as he explained, which we did in 53 feet. This wall came in exactly on line. If we had missed the right direction 1 degree to the right, we would never have found a wall. One thing I should mention here is that we struck the first few drops of water, which increased considerably as we went down this run some 250 feet. This water made our progress very slow and very tedious. We drew it up in buckets full at first and poured it into the sump or the place where we had filled up the hole. Finally the fine black sediment in the leader puddled the sump so that it held water. The water would not sink down through it. Then we were stuck. We did not know what to do. At about that time Coyle came down the mine and we were sitting by wondering what to do. Coyle said to get a 10-foot pipe from the surface and bring it down. Lars Olsen, who was the shifter at this time, as Coyle said, went up the ladder like a cat and soon brought the pipe down. He had sharpened the pipe, so we rammed it down into the sump hole and let the water go on down. We kept repeating this process for many months until finally the whole sump hole clogged up, and then Coyle said, "Well boys, we have got to dig this all out and open up this hole again." This was a terribly nasty, mucky job. We were covered with slime and coming in and out of the mine as it slopped over on the ladder in many places. Finally, we got the hole all dug out, and we found an open fissure at the bottom of it which took the water away from that time on for many months. Thus, we realized why we had to dig that extra 50-foot hole. After we had got down the number 10 run 150 feet, we were nearing Christmas time. We all wanted to lay off a week for Christmas. We were just simply tired out pumping water 18 hours a day, and many were the troubles we had. Many interesting stories could be written concerning those troubles. Our biggest job was in pumping the water about 80 feet up to the sump hole. We had a 12-inch pump with a 4-inch cylinder with an 1.25-inch outlet and 2-inch suction hoses 20 feet long with 4-foot leverage on the handle, and it took 4 men at a time to run the pump with 2 extra men to change off every 5 minutes. We finally prevailed on the bishop to let us lay off for Christmas 3 days. After Christmas, when we came back to the mine, Bishop had a dream wherein he saw that he would see the face of the drift or the bottom of the hole by getting all the water out of it by Saturday 12 o'clock noon. During this interval we broke the head out of the pump. The head was 6 inches in diameter and 5/8 of an inch thick. This completely stopped our work. This occurred in the middle of the night. Lars Olsen asked me to go out and report to the bishop, who was sleeping in the cabin. The bishop told me to take a 5-gallon can and cut a piece of tin out of it the size of the head and take a piece of candle box a 1/2 inch thick and make a head with that. This seemed ridiculous to me to even consider it. If 5/8 inch solid cast iron would not stand the pressure, a piece of tin and a 1/2 inch of soft wood would never hold it. I went back down the mine and told Lars Olsen. Lars came back up out of the mine and got the material and a little piece of strap iron to put across, and we made a new head out of that and put it on. Bishop came down the mine just as I was screwing on the last nut. Suffice it to say, this improvised head did hold the pressure, and we pumped with that tin head for several weeks until we obtained a new one. This is a mystery that has never been explained. The head never did give out. At this time Lars said to the bishop that this is one dream that would not come true. You will not see the face of the drift Saturday noon. Coyle could not see how it would be possible either, as we had 3 days and nights of filling up with water while we were off for Christmas, and all that ran in during the time that we were pumping, but suffice it to say we did see the face by Saturday noon exactly at 12 o'clock. Coyle told us the deeper we got down in the mine, the better the air would be. This seemed contrary to all reason, but it proved to be true. There was a stream of air coming down the footwall side and going out on the top of the drift clear from the surface, and we did not have to pump air down the mine after we got down into the number 10 run. In the early fall of this same year, Bishop had a dream wherein he saw that James E. Talmage would come up on the hill. We were all wishing for him to come, which he did. There were a dozen or more men working at the mine at that time. Most of us went down into the mine with Dr. Talmage. He paid high tribute to our solid and safe ladder and the very safe manner in which the bishop had been shown an open fissure which would also take the water away. Among the many questions asked by Dr. Talmage, I explained to him what this hole was for, and I asked him, "Do you think we will ever find an open fissure down in that hole?" He said, very possibly, very possibly." This was the only encouragement he gave us that I remember of, and the only thing that we were worried about. We did find this open fissure exactly as it had been shown to the bishop. Narrow escape. In the digging of the mine there were many narrow escapes from death. I might relate one incident that happened to me. We had just stopped work to eat our lunch at noontime. There were about 6 of us. The others sat down along the incline drift where the track was. I was in charge of the men that day and was standing in the middle of the track. For some reason, I had not picked out a place to eat my lunch. While standing in the middle of the track, a mass of rock and clay fell out of the leader directly over my head. It was about 183 x 303 x 53. In some unaccountable manner I seemed to see this mass falling right over my head. As quick as lightning, I jumped both feet at once toward the south of the track. The mass of rock dropped exactly where I was standing. Had I not jumped in time, it would have crushed my body. It gave no warning as it slipped out from the wet fissure a leader. My brother Ralph was near me and was greatly astonished at how I avoided being hit with that mass of rock and dirt. At another time when we were digging this incline drift, I was told to shovel out the round of holes or clean out the muck in the face of the drift. I noticed overhead a little crack about 1/4 of an inch wide in the ceiling, where hung a large rock 183 x 363 x 62 long, extending the length of the drift. There was water dripping out from the back, and we had to haul the water up the drift 602 or 702 in the bucket. After we got most of the water out, then I got under this big rock to clean out the muck. I had worked there more than half an hour when Lars Olsen, the shifter, came down. Immediately he saw this crack about this rock and told me to come out from under it. He then took his candlestick and just touched this crack above the rock to see if it were solid. He had hardly touched it with his candlestick when the whole thing fell exactly where I had been working. It surely was providential that it did not fall while I was under it, as it took only the slightest touch of the candlestick to bring it down. At another time before this in the same drift, we were working one morning, and up the drift about 30 feet, where a crossfisher came across the drift, there was some water dripping out. Lars Olsen came down the drift, it being only about 1/22 from the footwall to the hanging wall. When he got to this place, where the water dripped down, he stopped abruptly and raised his candle to look at the drips. He had hardly raised his candle when down came a big slab of rock immediately in front of him about 183x32x32. Had he not hesitated to examine this place, he would have been exactly under this mess of rock when it fell. I saw this myself as I was watching him hurrying down the drift. His life was surely saved by his stopping to examine the drips. On another occasion in this same drift there were 6 of us working on the pump, 4 at a time. The pump was situated about 4 feet above the sump hole which had about 12 feet of water in it. I was resting at the time. 4 others were pumping. Dave Olsen was one of the 4 who was working. Suddenly the pump handle broke with a lurch which sent Dave over backwards, head first down the sump hole into this 12 feet of water. We were so shocked, we seemed to be frozen to the spot. As soon as we could gain possession of ourselves and come to his rescue, he came dripping up the ladder out of the sump hole. How he tumbled into that hole without striking his head or knocking himself unconscious we were unable to explain. Had he done so, he would have sunk to the bottom and been drowned before we could have gotten him out. This sump hole was about 5 feet in diameter, and it would have been a hard matter of getting him out before he drowned in the 12 feet of water, but the Lord surely was watching over him that no harm came to him. I was assigned to turn the drips as the water kept dripping down from the back overhead. I had to hammer and chip off the sharp points of the rock where the water would run down, and run the water over to the side of the drift, so the men working would not get wet. On one occasion a piece of steel flew off the hammer and hit me right in the pupil of my eye. I could not get it out as it seemed to bury itself right in the pupil of my eye. I went to Dr. Anderson of Springville and he put the eye at rest and had to dig a hole in the pupil to get the piece of steel out. He said it was doubtful whether I would be able to see out of that eye, but thanks to the Lord, it healed up perfectly and did not affect the vision at all. The time came that we were required to come up out of the upper workings and quit the work there because the church had served notice on Bishop Coyle that if he did not quit, they would cut us all off the church. So rather than be cut off the church, we conceded to their unjust demands. Soon after this Bishop Coyle was told in a dream that all this work, toil, hardship, and sacrifice was accounted to us for righteousness' sake. Bishop Coyle was shown that in the digging of this mine there would be a man killed unless we were very, very careful. One Monday morning Gardner and were going down the mine before the rest of us had arrived at the mine, as we always went home for the weekend. They were fooling with one another and sort of chasing each other down the ladders. He started down number 7 first ahead of Gardner. As number 7 was more than perpendicular, he had just got to this place when Gardner slipped from the ladder and fell. Because the ladder dipped back under, Gardner did not hit but fell to the bottom of the shaft about 100 feet and is killed. Before this time had fallen in this very same place, but nearing the bottom of the shaft, his overalls caught on the side of the ladder and broke his fall by tearing his overalls from bottom to top, and he landed uninjured and was able to climb out of the mine with very little assistance. Tunnel program. It was on the 10th of January, 1914, that Bishop Coyle had a most wonderful interview with 2 of the 3 Nephite apostles. Among other things, they showed where the tunnel was to be. We knew of the tunnel, but did not know just where it was to be commenced. There was 3 feet of snow at this time on the north slope of Knob Hill. Bishop Coyle was shown that down at the bottom of this north slope right in the gully there were 2 bare spots of ground, the smaller one just a little above this larger one. He was to commence the tunnel just where the large bare spot was. He was working at the mine at the time, and he told us that morning about the tunnel and about the bare spots, and that he was to go down there that morning and begin the tunnel. He chose the 2 oldest men, W.M. Pierce and W.M. Gamel, as he thought it would be easier for them to work the tunnel than to climb the ladders. Lars Olsen, the shifter, asked if he might go down with them. We could not imagine how there could be any bare spots of ground with all of that amount of snow. As they waded down the mountain, from the cabin located at the top of Knob Hill near the old workings, the snow came clear to their waists. Lars Olsen went ahead sort of breaking the trail. As they neared the place where the bare spots were designated, Olsen went on ahead. William Gamel said, "Bishop, how can there be any bare spots with all this snow? You can't see a bare spot anywhere on the mountains." Coyle reassured him that he would find them because he said he saw them there And, I know they are there. Camel said, I wish you had not told them we would find those bare spots because if we don't, they will all quit as the snow is always deepest in the gullies. Coyle confessed to Camel that he didn't see how there could be any bare spots with all that snow. Soon Lars Olsen got down to the little bluff, where he could see the gully, where the bare spots were to be found, and sure enough, there they were. He took off his hat and swung it around his head and shouted, here they are. He remained where he was until they got down there to him. They stood and looked at the bare spots and surveyed the whole neighborhood. There was not a track of any kind to be seen. The snow had just simply melted and left the ground bare, where these two bare spots were without any apparent reason that was visible for the snow melting on those spots. They dug out the face of the tunnel, and Coyle gave them instructions as to which way to go. Back from the tunnel to the west about 150 feet, a little ridge stood out. Coyle was shown and told to stand on this little ridge and lean out by holding on to the brush, and the direction of the tunnel was to be directly from him into the mountain. He came to this spot every few days to sight and give them direction into the mountain. If they moved to the right or to the left, he could tell by sighting from this point. The tunnel was to be straight into the mountain. At about 300 feet they were to strike a little water which he was told would be good to drink. By this water there was to be a smooth dark rock about 3 feet high. The color of the tunnel from the beginning was of a light yellowish hue. They were to go on in this straight tunnel and come to a dark streak on the left-hand side, and as they got further on many hundreds of feet, they were to come to a hog's back, which was a dark rib of rock which would cross the tunnel, coming to a little peak in the center of the tunnel which would be about 2 feet high from the bottom of the tunnel. He was told this little peak would be an assurance that they were exactly in line. He said it reminded him of a big black hog in the tunnel. Therefore, he called it the hog's back. All these things they found as they dug the tunnel exactly as the bishop had explained. From this hog's back, the rock would get dark and blocky, and further on a red streak would cross the drift. This red streak was to lead off to the right, which they were to follow a short distance until they came to a big east and west cross break, which undoubtedly is the Ajax Fault that extends from Santaquin to the Wasatch Mountains. Then they were to go down on this fissure which would be known as the Wince. This fissure was to cross the main tunnel a little further in the tunnel. He was shown that they would come to water in the tunnel, and the working men were continually asking, when will we come to the water? Coyle said, when we find the water, there will be a nice little stream which will run out of the tunnel and over the dump. They were required to dig the little ditch from the beginning of the tunnel for this water to run out in. This ditch was a veritable nuisance to dig. It caused them more trouble apparently than the rest of the digging. The workers tormented the bishop about finding this water a great deal. On one occasion, when they were pestering the bishop about getting the water, the inspiration of the Lord came to him, and he declared to the shift boss, we will get the water in 100 feet from here, and it will run over the dump. The shift boss had them drill a hole in the side of the drift at that point and drive in a wooden peg to mark the spot. They went on in the straight line 70 or 80 feet, and it was still as dry as powder. When they got 90 feet, it commenced to get damp. When they got 95 feet, the water ran down the tunnel down the ditch about 200 feet. When they struck a water fissure, the water ran out over the dump. The fulfillment of this prophecy was a great boon to the continuation of the working of the tunnel. Shut down. By the time they had dug the tunnel 300 feet, the church shut the mine down. About this time Coyle and his family had procured a ranch up near Burley, Idaho, and Coyle sold his farm in Benjamin and moved to Idaho and lived on the ranch. The mine remained shut down for 6 years. While Coyle lived in Idaho, he was put in as first counselor to the bishop. Toward the close of the 6 years, the bishop saw in a dream that he was to open the mine again and get the work underway. He had a letter written to Peter C. Carlson to start the work going. The letter should have been posted that day as the mail only came by twice a week, but the letter did not get posted. A few days after this, Peter C. Carlson, with 2 or 3 other brethren, came to Bishop's home in the vicinity of Burley and asked if they could start the mine going again. Bishop said, "Did you receive my letter?" They told him no. "Well," he said, "I wrote you a letter to tell you to start up the mine." Upon inquiring, he found out the letter had not been posted. They said that they did not have any money to get powder and necessary equipment to work the mine with. Bishop told them to go, and the Lord would open the way for them to get the necessary money. On their way back to Salt Lake, they stopped to see Horace Bro at Bountiful, and he gave them $700. He was the first man they contacted. With this money they started to work again in the tunnel. The work progressed very rapidly and very favorably. The Burley incident occurred when they were only 300 feet in the tunnel. The water came about 1900 feet in the tunnel. Bishop Coyle told the men that they would come to a place in the tunnel where a leader would turn off to the right. This leader would be an inch wide on the north side of the tunnel and would widen out to 18 inches wide on the south side of the tunnel. This fissure or leader would widen out in a few feet to more than the width of the ordinary tunnel or drift. He was to follow this fissure off to the right and keep on the west wall of the 60 or 70 feet when they would come into some black. The fissure would turn black and the leader would go along the top of the drift. This drift he called the manway, and it was just a very little uphill. This fissure was to have side drifts in it at various places along the line, and in the main, there would be 5 of these drifts which he compared to 5 fingers taking off from the hand. In each of these fingers or drifts they would find very good ore. He was not given specific details of this program and was told he would have to work that out by the inspiration of the Spirit. Suffice it to say, they have gone into some 500 feet of this black rock which is highly mineralized. Soon after they struck this black rock, they found a streak of high-grade platinum ore. This streak went but a short distance, and they lost it. In this drift also they encountered a little water which ran out into the main tunnel in a little ditch a few inches big. The many assays taken in this black rock showed good value in gold and other precious metals. 3 different samples sent to California showed some 17 to 23 valuable rare metals. Mr. Wharf, an old assayer, declared there were rich values in uranium and other metals. John Harker, a metallurgical chemist from Denver, declared there was radium in this ore, and he got a radium burn from handling it which he nursed for several weeks, and it was not cured when he left. Parrott, another chemist, declared there was a combination of metals which made a high-grade stainless steel. While he was there testing, they made an electric furnace and melted out some 25 or 30 pounds of metal, which was of a white color from which they refined the stainless steel. Orvin Christensen told me that they took a little round piece of this stainless steel which they had dropped into water to cool when it was red hot and made some very extensive tests to try to break it, but were unable to break it. In driving the main tunnel, the bishop told them that they would come to a wall on the north side that would go right along with the tunnel. It would be black in color. It would extend about 50 feet. They would also find a wall on the south side which also would go along more than 100 feet, part of it paralleling this wall on the north. They found these walls exactly as described, the tunnel going right between the two. The bishop had told them there would be a fissure coming across the tunnel from the north side diagonally across until it hit the south side. This was to be the turndown in the main tunnel. At this point there were to be a number of definite conditions, which Bishop afterwards referred to as brother weights 10 points. 1. The fissure itself. 2. The fissure was to be in a white rock. 3. It was to go diagonally across. 4. There was to be another fissure standing straight up and down in the middle of the face of the tunnel. 5. This fissure was to be white. 6. The fissure crossing the tunnel was to have a slight dip back to the west. 7. It was to be about 3 inches wide. 8. There was to be a hanging wall on the north side at this place, and 9. A low black foot wall on the south side, and 10. A sloping hanging wall coming in overhead sloping to the east down toward the bottom of the tunnel on about a 20-degree slope. All of these definite requirements were there. This occurred about 33-50 feet in the tunnel. They dug a hole on the east side of this turndown fissure about 10 feet deep. It seemed to satisfy the bishop as this wall continued down. There being water in the tunnel, they did not go any further as they were not able to cope with the water situation at that time. They dug the tunnel on into the 3,400 feet point. At the end of the tunnel one could kneel down and see daylight at the mouth of the tunnel, showing the tunnel to be straight. Here we might say that, if the tunnel had not been straight, they would never have found these required conditions. The bishop had no instrument to go by to make the tunnel straight, and mining engineers declared that it was an impossibility to run a straight tunnel without mechanical instruments. They marveled at the possibility of it as it had never been done before for such a long distance. The bishop was guided by inspiration in his direction. This is the end, where the present tunnel is. The program pertaining to the turndown, as I remember it in part, is as follows. The west wall was to dip back a little to the west, and they are to follow that. They will not go very far until they will come into a soft, low-grade ore which the bishop referred to as the soft. It will be light-colored and rather gravelly in its composition. The west wall will get rotten and slough off and will not be permanent all the way. In digging down through this run, which is to be more than 100 feet practically straight down, they will have to be very careful so that it will not cave in and require timbering. They will make rapid progress in this run and will be able to shovel much of it without blasting. This low-grade ore will color the dump a little light creamy color. When they reach the capping over the rich gold ore, the capping will be so hard they will despair to drill through it. They will try here and there and feel around for a soft place to drill in, but will not be able to find one. This cap rock will be around 3 feet thick of a grayish color. This virtually is the capping over the chimney which leads down into the body of rich gold ore, where he saw the 9 rooms previously mined. While I was on a mission, in a sort of dream vision, I saw these 9 rooms all dug out, and 4 or 5 men working in one of these rooms. They were getting out a great block of rich gold ore about 183 x 303 x about 62 in length. As I stood watching them, they were working in a most beautiful system of harmony. It appeared as though one of the men was in charge of the work, but he was as actively engaged in the work as the others. There were no orders given, but each one seemed to know exactly what to do. They were barring this great block of ore out of the site onto a flat trolley car. In their conversation, I learned that this block was a special block of ore, to be used in the temple, or for its building as they said, this block is for the temple. While they were loading this block of ore, I walked along the west drift from which the 9 rooms took off. I noticed the rooms were rather dusty, and I took my pocket knife and scraped some of the dust off the rock to see what was under the dust, and to my great surprise I found the rock full of little streamers of gold about the size of ordinary baling wire. After walking far enough to see about a half-dozen rooms, I came back to where they were loading the block of ore on the trolley flat car. They had just completed loading it and were running it out of the main tunnel, which tunnel came out of the mountain going west and apparently nearer at the northwest corner of the ore body. This ended my manifestation. I don't know where the tunnel came out to the surface. In digging the main tunnel, the men were always asking, when will we get to the turndown? During these days Bishop was still living in Idaho. On one occasion, President Joseph F. Smith came to him in a dream and gave him special instruction about seeing that all the stock accounts had on the books in perfect order so that he could give an account of all the stock belonging to the company and who owned it. He illustrated this by saying when a president of the church was voted on by the church membership, it was necessary to use the words, "We sustain president whoever it may be, as prophet, seer, and revelator." He used this expression to illustrate it was just as necessary for the bishop to have a full account of the stock as it was to use those words in voting for a president of the church. Then he asked the bishop if he would see to it that all this business was properly entered on the books, and the bishop said yes. President Joseph F. Smith went over this instruction 3 times very similarly as Jesus told Peter to feed my sheep, which the bishop said he thought of at the time. Then President Smith said, "Now come with me," and in a moment they were in the mine tunnel. President Smith said, "Now bring your men up here," meaning to the turndown. President Smith pointed out the spot and said, "Put a round of holes in here," which the bishop had the men do. Then they moved back a little space while the blast went off. Then they returned to the spot and shoveled out the rock from the hole the blast had made, and there was the soft ore revealed. Bishop Coyle got down on his knees and looked out of the tunnel and saw daylight outside, showing the tunnel had to be straight. President Smith said, "Does this satisfy you, that you will get all the rest of it as has been shown to you just as definitely as you have found this soft ore?" Bishop Coyle said yes. This ended the visitation or the dream. Chapter 4. A Comprehensive Study of the Coil Relief Mine. By James R. Christensen. Another interesting account of the history of the relief mine was written by James R. Christensen for a BYU history class in May of 1957. His information was obtained from friends and relatives of Bishop Coyle, as well as from many other sources. To save space, appendices are not included. A Comprehensive Study of the Coil Relief Mine. By James R. Christensen. Preface. The object of this paper is to present in a clear, unbiased manner the story of the Coil Relief Mine, or as it is more commonly called, the Dream Mine, and some of the people and facts associated with it. Research has been of an impersonal nature. No attempt is made on the part of the researcher to project his feelings or attitudes for or against the mine, or incidents and personalities connected with its history. One must, however, realize that pure objectivity in a project of this nature is hard to come by. In dealing with personalities, as will be very much the case in this paper, it is only realistic to acknowledge that feelings, not of an objective nature, will be wholly involved. This, however, should not distract from the aim of this paper which, as before stated, is to present as complete and unbiased a history as is possible in the time for, and the required length of this paper. Cooperation on the part of friends and relatives of Bishop John H. Coyle, Dream Mine founder and president, is greatly appreciated. Introduction. The belief that every worthy member has a right to personal revelation in any of its varied forms is a distinguishing feature of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In fact, the very foundation of this church may be said to consist wholly of divine communication with God through various forms of revelation. It is, therefore, not surprising that, with such a background, countless numbers of individual members make sincere and possible rightful claim to divine communication with an immortal or unearthly source. This fact has in most cases been to the advantage of the church both individually and collectively. It has made for a tightly knit, obedient, and productive organization which has witnessed an enormous growth both physically and spiritually since its founding in 1830. It has often been the case, however, that such revelations have caused disruptions in the church and have been received contrary to an established order, this order being that the individual member may receive revelation for his own welfare or that of his family. But the right of revelation for the welfare of the church as a whole is the right of the president of the church only. 1. Revelations received contrary to this would, according to Latter-day Saint belief, be out of harmony with the will of God. 2. Many of the asserted revelations have been concerned with the financial welfare of the church. The usual basis of this second type is the finding of vast amounts of wealth through divine guidance by some individual or group of individuals, the purpose of the discovery being the financial independence of the church, the redeeming and establishing of Zion in Jackson County, the bringing of aid and comfort to all worthy saints during the disastrous times to come, and the establishing of a gold standard at a time when the national and world standards are destroyed. Following are a number of examples which illustrate the above. In the mountainous area near Brigham City, Utah, is a mine, the Majestic, owned by Frederick J. Holton. 3. As Apostle James E. Talmage, 4, reported, this mine is said to be similar to the Dream Mine, which will be discussed later. Mr. Holton, who is now 94 years old, states that he was directed by heavenly messengers to begin mining for gold at a specified place. The object of the mine was the use of its contained wealth for the purpose of making the church in the Brigham City area self-sustaining. A form of the United Order was to be initiated, and the city itself was to grow to be larger than Los Angeles, California. Holton makes claim to a personal 1. Doc. and Cov. Sec. 132-7. 2. I bid. Sec. 2812-13. 3. The mine is at present being worked by the son of Holton. Holton himself is in a rest home for the aged. 4. Minutes of weekly MTG. Of the General Authorities of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Journal History, August 7, 1913, page 4. Visitation of the Savior who ordained Holton to receive a position of highest authority in the church. 1. As before stated, Holton is now 94 years old and is blind. He is, however, surprisingly able physically and enjoys comparatively good health. 2. A second and much better known example is the Humbug mines of Jesse Knight. 3. The Humbug is one of few, and perhaps the only mining venture of this type, that has as yet fulfilled its revealed destiny. During the late 1800s, Jesse had been prospecting along on the east side of Godiva Mountain in the Tintic, Utah, area. He sat down under a pine tree to rest, when to his great surprise he heard a voice say, "This country is for the Mormons." He felt that this message referred to mining in that area. Any benefits realized should be used to further the cause of Mormonism. 4. In 1894, while they were working the Humbug claim, Jesse told his son, "We are going to have all the money we want, as soon as we are in a position to handle it properly. We will someday save the credit of the church." 5. 1. Interview with Norman Pierce, prominent stockholder in Coyle Mining Company, April 30, 1957. 2. I bid. 3. A friend named Roundy, who in refusing to become associated with Knight's claim, referred to it as a damned old humbug. This name stuck. 4. J. William Knight, The Jesse Knight Family, Salt Lake City, Deseret News Press, 1941, pages 83-86. 5. The humbug was a success. Jesse continued to invest his money and eventually became a multimillionaire. The mine required some 12 years of continual labor before it finally paid off in the latter part of 1896. Letters brought to light in 1930 show that Jesse in 1896 responded to a plea by President Woodruff, who was calling on wealthy members to come to the aid of the church, which at the time was in great financial need. He presented to the church a check of $10,000. This was a literal fulfillment of the above prophecy. In later years, sums amounting to several hundred thousands of dollars were given the church by night from this mine. 1. A third example is that of Ben Bullock, who in the year 1915 claimed to have received a heavenly visitation while plowing on his farm near Provo, Utah. Coming to the end of a furrow, Bullock relates that he suddenly became very weak, but he did not lose his senses. At this moment, many things concerned with his future were revealed to him. He saw that he would suffer as far as his standing in the church was concerned, but he was not to become bitter. 2. He was to become the steward of great amounts of wealth, but only after losing all but his few mining interests. This wealth should be for the building up of the kingdom of God and the gathering of the saints to Zion. It would also be used to feed and house the saints during times of famine. He saw a large, beautiful mountain which had not existed before, but which represented the great wealth he would eventually receive. He was told that, if he was faithful, all of the above and many other things would come to pass. 3. In 1921, on the night following his death, Jesse Knight appeared to Bullock and stated that Jesse's mission had been 1. Knight, pages 84 to 86. 2. Bullock was in great financial need and was contemplating giving up his position as bishop. He received the impression, however, that he should remain. Nevertheless, he was released a short time later. This was at the time when to be bishop was to remain bishop for life. 3. Ben Bullock, personal history, unpublished history written during the 1930s. To reveal the treasures of the earth and distribute them for the edification of the church and its members. His mantle was now to rest upon Bullock, whose mission would be even greater than that of Jesse's. He should go through much trial and tribulation, even more than Jesse had gone through. 1. Bullock has now spent 42 years at his task. He has mining and oil claims in several of the western states. His main mine is the Bullock Tunnel, located in a canyon near Payson, Utah. This mine was located, and work has progressed through the use of a divining rod. According to Bullock, he should strike the mother lode soon, perhaps even at the time of this writing. 2. On the night of February 13, 1957, Bullock states that John H. Coyle appeared to him. After renewing their friendship, Coyle expressed dissatisfaction with the way his mine was being run and said that Bullock was digging in the right place and would soon strike a very rich ore. He also stated that the chain of mountains to the southwest of Payson, Utah, was filled with great quantities of ore. 3. 1. Ibid. 2. Pierce, interview, May 10, 1957. 3. Certified statement made by Ben Bullock in the presence of witnesses on February 14, 1957. Note, this appearance seems to agree with what is called the green spot dream of John H. Coyle. In this dream, Coyle claims to have seen himself with Bullock and a group of friends going up Water Canyon located near his mine. The group proceeded to go around the mountainside with horses, while he and Bullock continued up the canyon on foot. They were forced to take cover from enemies who began firing at them from atop the ridge. As they approached the top, they came to a clearing which they must cross in order to reach a green spot on the other side which would furnish safety to them. Coyle warned Bullock of the danger, but he nevertheless broke from cover and reached safety just ahead of Coyle. Here they were welcomed by their friends who had gone around. A suggested meaning to this dream is that after much trial and peril, both would reach the desired goal of success. Bullock or Bullock's tunnel would produce first, followed shortly thereafter by Coyle's dream mine. With this as an introduction, we will now consider the history of the Coyle Relief Mine, which, according to an eminent sociologist, John H. Nelson, has caused the greatest social movement ever to exist within the body of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. 1. History of John H. Coyle, founder and former president of the Coyle Relief Mine. John H. Coyle was born August 14, 1864, in Spanish Fork, Utah. At the age of 8 he went with his family to settle in Mopa Valley on the banks of the Muddy River about 400 miles southwest of Spanish Fork. This was an answer to a call by the president of the Latter-day Saint Church, Brigham Young. 2. At the age of 9, Coyle helplessly watched as his father was crushed beneath a rock slide. They were working on a mountainside in Spanish Fork Canyon when the accident occurred. 3. Throughout his youth, Coyle was noted for his sensitive and deeply religious nature. He often made a point of reminding the other members of his family of their duty to God and the church. 4. 1. Norman Pierce, Relief Through a Dream Mine, page 26, Personal Collection of Revelations of John H. Coyle written in narrative form, 1930 to 1957. 2. Interview with Merrill Coyle, son of John H. Coyle, April 14, 1957. 3. Ibid. 4. Interview with Mrs. Ellen Rose Fillmore, sister of John H. Coyle, May 5, 1957. In 1884, at the age of 20, Coyle married Miss Emily Holt. He purchased a farm just south of Spanish Fork and for a number of years did quite well. One night in 1886, Coyle had a dream in which he learned where a lost cow could be found. The next morning, he told his wife of the dream and stated that he would go see if the information given him was correct. Upon arriving at the place indicated, he saw the cow standing just as he had seen her in his dream. 1. This was the beginning of a long series of dreams, visitations, and inspired happenings. Coyle reported that one day in 1890, while plowing in his fields, a voice spoke to him and asked him if he would go on a mission. Looking around but seeing nobody, he scratched his head in wonderment and continued his plowing. The same voice, in a somewhat more commanding tone, said again, "John, will you go on a mission?" He immediately answered, "Yes." He went directly home and told his family he had been called on a mission and had to do something about it, although he had no finances at the time. Shortly thereafter, his bishop called by and asked him if he could go on a mission for the church. He said he could. He rented his farm to support his wife and 3 children during his absence and sold a cow to provide funds for his journey to the mission field. 2. During his mission, Coyle earned the profound respect of his fellow missionaries and his mission president, J. Golden Kimball, who became a lifelong friend. 3. 1. Coyle, interview, April 28, 1957. 2. Coyle, interview, May, 1957. 3. Ibid. Just prior to his entering the mission field, 2 Mormon elders had been killed by enemies of the church. The people were especially bitter about polygamy. On one occasion, Coyle and his companion were accosted by 4 men who placed them against a wall and were apparently going to shoot them. The leader of the group, an extremely large, red-whiskered man, did nearly all the talking and said to them, "Now tell us what you are doing with all our young girls that you're taking to Utah and turning into polygamists." Coyle began talking, and after an hour, the 4 men laid their guns aside and began arguing among themselves. The red-whiskered man was determined to go on with the killing, but about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, he started asking questions. Before morning, they were almost converted. They let Coyle and his companion go and told them that they had been misled and wished them well on their journey. 1. On another occasion he wrote to his wife telling her of a dream wherein he was shown railroad men surveying a right-of-way through the middle of his farm. He asked his wife to confirm this. Just 2 days previous to receiving his letter, she had written him concerning this very problem. The letters had passed each other en route. He made this information a matter of prayer, requesting that his farm might remain intact. The impression came that he should not worry, for the route would be changed and his farm would not be harmed. Apparently this is what happened. 2. After he came home from his mission, his farm was not very prosperous, so he peddled butter and cheese from Mercer to Tintic for about 8 years. During this time, he received his 1. Coyle, interview, May 5, 1957. 2. Pierce, page 3. Revelation concerning his mine. In 1908 he was sustained as bishop of the Leland Ward, Nebo State of the LDS Church, and was released in 1913. In 1918 he went to Idaho, where he ranched until 1925. During this time he spent 4 years as a bishop's counselor. An experience demonstrative of Coyle's great faith occurred during his stay in Idaho. One day while tending his crops which were about ready for harvest, Coyle, accompanied by one of his boys, observed an electric storm of great proportion coming rapidly up the valley in their direction. Realizing that such a storm would mean total destruction of his harvest, Coyle knelt with his boy on the ditch bank and in mighty prayer, rebuked the storm and commanded that it change its course. To the utter amazement of the boy and the sincere expectation of Coyle, the storm changed its course and proceeded around the mountain on the side, leaving the ripened crops totally unharmed. 1. In 1926 he spent a year in Nevada as foreman of a mine. He then returned to his mine in Spanish Fork and spent the remainder of his years managing and working it. According to his son and others, Coyle, during his lifetime, made many predictions which were fulfilled, and many that await fulfillment. 2. In 1909 he foresaw the coming of World War I and that the 145th Field Artillery would be inducted, but would at no time see combat. When news came in late 1918 that the 145th was being moved up, Coyle received much criticism. Nevertheless, he stuck by his prediction. It is now a matter of record. 1. Coyle, interview, May 5, 1957. 2. Note prophecies of Coyle in Appendix I. That the war ended on November 11, and the 145th, although on the front lines, saw no action. 1. Coyle foresaw the Republican victory of 1928, but stated that the man riding the donkey would win in 1932 and continue to win, establishing an unprecedented record of successive victories at the polls. During this time the elephant would become sick and unable to regain its feet. One attempt after another would be made until eventually, after many years, the elephant would rise to its feet and remain on them for a number of years, but would then go down and the country with it. There would then follow an unprecedented period of war, confusion, turmoil, and national disaster. 2. In August 1942, while visiting a dentist to have his teeth repaired, Coyle stated that in 3 years from then, World War II would end. He told his family to make note of this, which they did. 3. It is now historical fact that on August 10, 1945, Japan surrendered and hostilities ceased. On Thursday, April 17, 1948, Coyle was excommunicated from the Latter-day Saint Church on charges of insubordination to the rules and authority of the Church. 4. He was rather ill at the time and became much worse thereafter. This illness continued until May of 1949, when he was taken to the Payson City Hospital. On May 17, at the age of 84, Coyle died and was buried in the Spanish Fork Cemetery. 5. 1. Coyle, interview, May 5, 1957. 2. Pierce, interview, May 7, 1957. 3. Coyle, interview, May 5, 1957. 4. The Deseret News, April 16, 1948, page 6. 5. The Deseret News, May 19, 1949, page 7. Since he never kept a diary or personal record of any kind, many of the visions and spiritual experiences of Coyle can no longer be accounted for. However, the one experience upon which all sources agree is the vision received in 1894 wherein the mind was revealed to him. On this subject, the following statement was made by Carter E. Grant in a letter to James E. Talmage on September 30, 1931. I heard this story repeated by Brother Coyle in 1911, 1912, 1913, 1914, and 1915, and many times since. One peculiar thing about Brother Coyle, he never crosses himself, repeating his dream with the same exactness as he did in the beginning. One would think he would change it or add to it, but he never has. History of the Mind. One night during the month of August 1894, a personage from another world appeared to Coyle in a dream and conducted him in the spirit to a mountain located to the east of his home. He was taken to a certain spot on the side of the mountain where the earth parted before them, and they entered without any apparent resistance. 1. As they proceeded through the mine, the messenger talked freely and explained the various formations and the runs. As the excavation proceeded down through the mountain. 2. They followed a cream-colored leader which he was told would mark the line he should follow in the mine he was to open. At about a 1,400-foot level he was shown a tunnel he was to dig which would contact the original shaft. Continuing from this level for 90 to 100 feet, they came to a capstone. 1. Letter from Bishop John F. Warner, nephew of John H. Coyle to James R. Christensen, April 20, 1957. 2. Statement by Carter E. Grant to James E. Talmage, September 9, 1931, page 1. This capstone was flat and about 3 feet in thickness and exceedingly hard. It was made known to him that, when the actual mining operation reached this point, it would take almost a month to penetrate the stone. 1. Beneath the capstone was a large body of rich, white quartz containing leaf gold. On this subject, Coyle one time stated, "When I was taken through the mine for the first time in 1894, after being shown the rich body of ore beneath the capstone, I was told that the ancient inhabitants of this land had at one time discovered these riches, having penetrated into the southwest portion of the great body of gold ore. Then the values had been closed to them, and would be closed to us too, if we also became lifted up in pride and hard-hearted, using this wealth for self-gratification only. 2. Continuing through this rich gold quartz for about 175 feet, Coyle and his companion came to what was the remains of an ancient Nephite tunnel which ran in a southwest direction and came out in Water Canyon. 3. Going down this tunnel for a short distance, he was shown into 9 large rooms from which the ore had been mined. The pillars, standing in the middle of the rooms and supporting the roof, were filled with gold. 4. He was then taken out through the above-mentioned tunnel, coming out in Water Canyon. 1. Pierce, page 4. 2. Pierce, page 4. 3. Note, map, Appendix 3. 4. Note, Coyle has often stated that, when the capstone is reached and penetrated, that the value of stock will jump to $5 a share. This will continue for a period of 9 months, at which time the 9 rooms will be entered, and a single share of stock will be worth $1,000. During this 9-month period, first the side drift, and then the winds will begin producing. By this time, complete harmony will exist between the church and the operators of the mine. This experience was so impressed upon the mind of Coyle that he felt as though he had spent a lifetime working the tunnel shown him. He was also shown the great breaks back to the west, where all formations, instead of tipping to the east, would reverse and tip to the west. These were near the end of the tunnel, which was to be dug, and 2 natural, parallel walls led directly from them over to a smooth, slick wall that dipped down to the capstone. If these formations were encountered, it would be a sure sign that the workmen would find the ore. Many other things were pointed out which would be signs of progress to him. 1. The messenger talked with Coyle as one man talks to another. He was dressed in temple robes and seemed exceedingly anxious that all the details should be stamped firmly in Coyle's mind. A promise of success was given according to his faithfulness. 2. A number of visits were necessary before Coyle finally relented and began work on the tunnel. An incident which convinced him that he should do as instructed occurred when the messenger appeared for the 3rd time. He pointed out the necessity of beginning immediately on the mine, and pointing to an artesian well which Coyle's neighbor was drilling, said, "Tomorrow at 12 noon, they will strike a good flow of water, and at 4 o'clock they will take the drill and rigging away. If this comes true, so also shall all that I have shown you about the mine come true. Now, will this be witness and testimony enough for you to begin this work?" 3. Coyle answered, "Yes." According to Coyle's wife, who had been instructed by Coyle to pay special attention to the well, the above happened just as. 1. Note. Further signs shown Coyle by messenger, Appendix 2. 2. Pierce, page 6. 3. Coyle, interview, May 1957. The messenger said it would. So on September 3, 1894, accompanied by a close friend, Joseph Brockbank, he set out for the mountain and found the designated spot. 1. "There," said Coyle, "dig in that spot, and if you do not find a cream-colored formation within 3 feet of the surface, then there is nothing to my dream." 2. The cream-colored rocky formation was encountered. This convinced them, and on September 17, 1894, after staking out the necessary claims, work was started. 3. On March 4, 1909, the Coyle Relief Mine was incorporated. Stockholders were John H. Coyle, with 13,000 shares, John H. Coyle, trustee, with 49,000 shares, George Hales, with 1,000 shares, John F. Beck, with 1,000 shares, B. F. Woodward, with 1,000 shares, and J. P. Creer, with 1,000 shares. There were 42,000 shares of treasure stock, making a total of 114,000 shares. 4. 20 years went by and the SHAFT, 5, was sunk some 1,400 feet. It was now a tremendous task to raise the muck to the surface through a series of 11 long windlasses. An even greater problem was caused by fast seeping water in the shaft. Accordingly, a tunnel was started which would cut below the shaft and drain the water from it. 6. 1. Coyle and Brockbank later stated that the spot seemed to have a halo of light above it. For many years a small monument designated the spot where the light appeared. 2. Pierce, page 6. 3. Pierce, page 6. 4. Articles of Incorporation, Coyle Relief Mine, page 2. 5. Note, Map of Mine, Appendix 3. 6. Note, Revelation on Tunnel, Appendix IV. Work began on the tunnel on January 6, 1914. 1. On the following Saturday, January 10, 1914, Coyle was awake in his bed, contemplating a remarkable dream he had just had, when suddenly a powerful vibrating influence came over him, lasting several minutes. It recurred twice more, causing him to rise up in bed. As he did so, 2 men dressed in gray clothes, having white hair and beards, one taller than the other, came stepping up to his bedside. The shorter of the two did all the talking and declared that he and his companion were in charge of the mine, telling brother Coyle that he had started the tunnel in the right spot and all that he had seen in his dream should be fulfilled. After outlining the future for nearly 2 hours, they departed, promising that both men and money would be provided according to his needs. 2. In later years, Coyle made plain that these visitors were 2 of the 3 Nephites who chose to remain on the earth at the time of Christ's visit to this continent. 3. 6 months after the appearance of the 2 Nephites, the church brought pressure to bear and the mine was closed. It did not reopen again until September 1920. 4. As work was resumed, it was found that the timber in the original shaft had deteriorated to the extent that mining in the shaft would be dangerous. Therefore, all efforts were put to the furthering of the tunnel, which was about 200 feet long. 1. Map. Appendix 3. 2. Grant, Statement, September 1931. 3. Book of Mormon, 3rd Nephi, Chap. 23. 4. Coyle had stated that he was told by the Nephites that this would happen. They also told him that the same power which closed the mine would also open it. This reportedly happened. The church allowed the mine to open on the basis that the running of it would not be through supernatural power. Just as Coyle predicted, so it has been reported, water was struck at about 300 feet. 1. At 1,300 feet, the red iron formation was encountered, and 20 feet farther, the large white vein. At 2,000 feet, the odd-shaped vein, 2 inches on one side and 18 inches on the other, which was to form their side drift, was encountered. At 2,200 feet, a stream of water burst forth which filled the ditch that Coyle had ordered, dug the full length of the tunnel. At 3,000 feet, the strata reversed to the west, and the tunnel ran straight on between parallel walls that led to a slick, smooth wall which dipped downward and, as expected, will lead to the capstone, 100 feet below. At this point, one can kneel down and see daylight at the mouth of the tunnel. By this time, many people had become interested in the mine and stock sales increased. 2. This continued for a while, but as the years passed and no ore of value was produced, people began to doubt. However, in February 1929, a platinum strike 3 was reported and the value of stock went to $5 per share. 4. Coyle felt that this boom would be only temporary and allowed only a few hundred shares to be sold. 5. A few months later, when it did pass, Coyle gave those who bought stock as many shares again as they had purchased. In 1931, at an annual outing celebrating the 37th year since the founding of the mine, W.A. Jones, mine secretary. 1. Appendix 2. 2. My own grandfather became interested about this time, and since he had no money, he traded his horse and wagon for several hundred shares. In later years, when a member of his family had a large debt to pay, he sold furniture from his home rather than part with his stock. He is typical of many men in Spanish Fork who are not radical about the mine, but who have a strange, lingering faith that it will someday produce. 3. See map, Appendix 3. 4. Spanish Fork Press, February 28, 1929, page 1. 5. Ibid. March 17, 1929, page 1. Recalled prophecies of Coyle which showed that the time was near when the mine would begin producing. Property was mortgaged to the limit, cars and trucks the size of boxcars were on the highways, the mining industry was paralyzed, and the 4-year drought appeared to be in its first stages. All these signs were pointed out by Coyle as indicative of the time when the mine would come in. 1. In August 1932, the State Securities Commission called before it the leaders of the Coyle Mining Company to discover how it could operate without selling stock and without levying assessments. 2. Martin M. Larson, attorney for the company, explained that in 1926, when the state had denied him the right to sell stock, Coyle called his board of directors together and had them issue him 50,000 shares of special stock to be put in his own name. There was no law against selling personal stock. Mr. Jones, company secretary, stated that there were about 275,000 shares outstanding held by about 1,300 stockholders. No stockholders' meeting had been held since 1923, the last one having ended in some manner of unpleasantness. 3. The mine was to be studied by a geologist, and the company's books were to be presented to the commission. 1. Spanish Fork Press, September 30, 1931, page 1. 2. The Deseret News, August 20, 1932, page 8. 3. Meetings were usually held each Thursday evening. Purpose of the meetings was to discuss progress in the mine and encouraged the faith of the stockholders in the future of the mine. In this manner, stockholders became acquainted with prophecies of the past church leaders which justify the mine. See Prophecies of Church Leader, Appendix B. On January 20, 1933, the Securities Board ordered an investigation of the Coyle Mining Company. 1. This was done because of the refusal of the company's officers to surrender their accounts to the board, and also because of a report made by Frederick J. Pack, who had investigated the mine for the state. 2. Pack reported that the mine offered no encouragement whatsoever for the future. He condemned the enterprise on the basis of its geological and commercial features. He stated that seldom, if ever, had he seen a mining prospect so lacking in mineralization. On January 24, 1933, Coyle answered Pack's charges by showing proof of the productivity of the mine. 3. The Securities Commission ordered a suit filed against the company for selling stock without permission. When the trial was held in the latter part of 1933, it was readily dismissed because key witnesses for the state changed their testimonies. Instead of accusing him, they defended Coyle and asked his forgiveness. 4. Over the years, ore of many kinds had been taken from the mine. Values had been found, but none in sufficient quantity to merit the refining and processing of the ores which contained them. Coyle maintained that theirs was a special ore that, when heated by the current methods of processing, the precious metals contained therein disappeared in a black smoke. There was simply no plant that could handle it. So in July 1932, during the depths of the Depression, he built and 1. The Deseret News, January 20, 1933, page 1b. 2. See Statement of Carter Grant to Apostle Talmage concerning visit of Pack to the mine. Appendix by. 3. See article, Truth About the Dream Mine, Appendix 6. 4. Samuel W. Taylor, Time in the Dream Mine Esquire, LXI, November 1943, page 106. Equipped a concrete flotation mill at a cost of over $60,000. 1. The mill was paid for in full at the time of its building. 2. In this same year, Coyle felt that he should make preparations for the large grain bins which were to hold the millions of bushels of grain to be purchased with gold derived from the mine. Large tracts of land were surveyed, leveled, graded, and terraced, but although the plans were drawn up, the bins were never built. In 1937, John Harper and his supporters, Gus Engelhart and Jake Brackage, came to Utah and were directed to the mine by Carl Buhner of Salt Lake City. They brought with them a new type processing plant which was the invention of Harper. The plant contained a new type solution which had the power of dissolving the metals contained in the ore. The metals previously reported to have disappeared in smoke could now be preserved. The plant was installed in the flotation mill which seemed to have been built to the exact specifications necessary to house it. 3. Some ore was processed, but the owners were soon influenced by prospects of greater returns elsewhere and left in 1938. 1. Samuel W. Taylor, Time in the Dream Mine Esquire, LXI, November 1943, page 106. 2. When asked where he got the money necessary to run his mine and build his mill, Coyle referred to the promise of the two Nephites in 1914 wherein they promised him all necessary funds and men for his project. 3. Pierce, interview, April 23, 1957. In 1943, Coyle was certain that the time had finally come for the mine to produce. 1. He was now 79 years old and had been working the mine for about 49 years. He had been shown in 1938 the exact spot where number 5 tunnel would begin producing. What he had thought to be the sure signs had appeared during the 30s, and he was convinced that it would not be long. 2. He continued, however, to hold meetings and work the mine until he became too ill to do so. He died May 17, 1949. The mine was closed after Coyle's death and was not opened again until the summer of 1955. At this time, there appeared a man from Texas, Al Sinclair, who was thought by some, because of his knowledge of the mine, to be the third Nephite. 3. Under his direction, work was resumed at the mine and continued for a year and a half. Around Christmas time, 1956, it was again closed. During this period of a year and a half, 3 tunnels were dug at a point about 180 feet down in the winds. 4. Digging had to be done at this point since the 1. It seems Coyle was never certain when the mine would produce. John F. Warner relates, "My father went to the mine to work early in 1895. One week he had to stay home because mother was ill. Uncle John came by and remarked back, "We may strike it this week, and you won't be there." Many years later he told me that he never would strike the gold as long as the church fought him on it. Throughout the 30s, one of Coyle's sons relates that the father was often exasperated because the mine did not come in as expected. 2. Spanish Fork Press, January 7, 1947, page 1. 3. Coyle claimed that the third Nephite should appear and aid in the bringing in of the mine, but Sinclair was unsuccessful. He took a half-ton of ore back to Texas with him, from which he manufactured acidless auto batteries with a liquid obtained by processing the ore. In a report of the stockholders' meeting held May 14, 1957, this venture was reported a success, and a second half-ton of ore was sent to Sinclair. 4. CMAP, Appendix 3. Remainder of the winds was and still is filled with water, and pumps could not sufficiently clear it. The purpose of these tunnels was to reach the rich vein of sacking ore supposedly located at the bottom of the winds, 275 feet below the main tunnel. 1. At present, the only work done on the mine is the annual assessment, which amounts to $8,800 per year. Throughout its history, many obstacles have stood in the way of the progress of the mine. Lack of funds, lack of workers, and lack of machinery were constant inhibitors of advancement. These, however, were internal problems and were usually overcome. Chief opposition was of an external nature, coming from the state, the church, and numerous individuals. Opposition to the mine. Individuals opposed to the mine usually have been those who never invested in the mine themselves, but have seen others put all they owned into the project, never to realize any benefits from it. 2. Many opposed the mine because of religious convictions and also because their church leaders opposed it and had instructed them to do the same. A special individual case is that of Peter C. Carlson, who from 1920 to 1926 managed the mine during the absence of Coyle. In 1931 he wrote a letter in which he denounced Coyle, the mine, and 1. Pierce, interview, May 10, 1957. 2. It is a fact that many people invested all their savings and much of what they earned in the mine with the faith that it would soon produce and supply them with such quantities of wealth so they would be able to pay off whatever debts were incurred due to their mine investments. The mine did not produce. These people were unable to pay their debts and therefore lost much, if not all, of their possessions. All manifestations connected with it as being false, but if inspired, it was from the devil and not from God. 1. By 1926, the state had taken a decided stand against the mine. The company was deprived of the right to sell stock, and during the 30s was indicted in court for fraud and misrepresentation. 2. The main opposition, however, came from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, of which Coyle was a member. During the early years of the mine, Coyle received the blessings of some church authorities, both local and general. His stake president, from whom he sought counsel, said the mine was of God. When Coyle approached Apostle George T. Teasdale, the apostle told him, "God bless you, go ahead." Counsel of 70 J. Golden Kimball was a stockholder and a lifelong friend of Coyle. 3. In 1908, Coyle was set apart as bishop of the Leland Ward, Nebo Stake. 4. By 1913, the authorities of the church had heard many disturbing reports concerning the mine and the visions connected with it. Letters were written from the general. 1. Letter written to whom it may concern, certified and signed by Peter C. Carlson, 1931, filed in the church archives in Salt Lake City. 2. Deseret News, August 20, 1932, PB 1. 3. Coyle claimed that when the two Nephites appeared in 1914, they instructed him to furnish Apostle Kimball with 500 shares of stock, even if he could not pay for it. Sometime later, when Kimball asked to buy exactly that amount of stock, it is reported that Coyle handed him the certificate which he already had made out. 4. Minutes of the weekly meeting of the General Authorities of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Journal History 1908, May 31, page 8. Authorities to Jonathan S. Page, president of the Nebo stake of the church, asking for full information concerning the mine which was located in that stake. On August 2, 1913, the presidency of the church published the following statement. 1. A warning voice. To officers and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, from the days of Hiram Page, Doc. and Cov. Sec. 28. At different periods there have been manifestations from delusive spirits to members of the church. Sometimes these have come to men and women who, because of transgression, become easy prey to the arch-deceiver. At other times these people who pride themselves on their strict observance of the rules and ordinances and ceremonies of the church are led astray by false spirits who exercise an influence so imitative of that which proceeds from a divine source that even these persons who think they are the very elect find it difficult to discern the essential difference. Apparently Satan has transformed himself to be an angel of light. All spiritual manifestations which are contrary to decisions of church authority are not from God, no matter how plausible they may appear. All direction and guidance for the direction of the church will come through its head. Members should understand this. All may receive inspiration for their own welfare and that of their families, but anything in discord with revelation received by the head of the church is unreliable. No person has the right to induce his fellow members of the church to engage in speculation or take stock in ventures of any kind or the specious. 1. Deseret News, Church Section, August 2, 1913, page 1. Claims of divine revelation or visions or dreams, especially when it is in opposition to the voice of recognized authority, local or general. We feel it our duty to warn the Latter-day Saints against mining schemes which have no warrant for success beyond the professed spiritual manifestations of their projectors and the influence gained over the excited minds of their victims. We caution the saints against investing money or property in claims of stock which bring no profit to anyone but those who issue and trade in them. Financial schemes to make money for the alleged purpose of redeeming Zion or providing means for the salvation of the dead or other seemingly worthwhile object should not deceive anyone acquainted with the order of the church and will result only in waste of time and labor which might be devoted now to doing something tangible and worthy and of record on earth and in the heavens. The counsels of the Lord through the channel he has appointed will be followed with safety. Therefore, O ye Latter-day Saints, profit by these words of warning. Per 2 Joseph F. Smith. Per 2 Anthony H. Lund. Per 2 Charles W. Penrose. On August 7 an answer to the letters written to President Page of the Nebo Stake and his counselors on April 22 and July 19 in regard to Bishop Coyle and his connection with the dream mine was discussed in a meeting of the general authorities of the church. President Joseph F. Smith suggested that President Francis M. Lyman be responsible to see that the Nebo Stake presidency do their duty by releasing Bishop Coyle as Bishop of the Leland Ward because of his connection with the dream mine. 1. Minutes of Weekly Meeting, Journal History, August 7, 1913. On August 16, the article of August 2 by the First Presidency was reproduced in the Deseret News under the heading of Dream Mines. 1. It was accompanied by the following article, owing to the importance of the subject treated in the letter of the First Presidency to the officers and members of the church which appeared in the Deseret News of August 2 of this year. It is reproduced at the head of this column. We trust the saints generally will profit by the advice given, and in order to bring it to the attention of all members, it might well be to cause the letter to be read in ward meetings or state conferences or other similar gatherings of the people. The First Presidency warns the saints against investing in worthless stock, even if promoters allege that they are guided by dreams and revelations. It is a timely warning. Almost everyone has heard stories of how such and such found a rich mine by following directions given in a dream, and many fondly hope for similar luck, but in most instances, it will be found on investigation that such stories have little or no foundation in fact. They belong to a class where rumors which like the wind bloweth where it listeth, and thou hearest the sound hereof, but canst not tell whence it cometh, or whither it goeth. No one should be guided by such rumors, but by reason enlightened by the Holy Spirit. It is a safe rule not to accept the counsel of anyone who is in any way antagonistic to those who have been duly appointed to lead and guide Israel. And it will be found that the promoters of dream mines and vision enterprises generally are of that class. They find fault and pass judgment without justification. But by that very fact they warn the saints to steer clear of them, just as the ringing or whistling of buoys during foggy weather call attention of mariners to the presence of danger by the noise they make. 1. Deseret News, Church Section, August 16, 1913, page 1. On August 24, during the Nebo Stake Conference, Coyle was released as Bishop of the Leland Ward by Apostle Lyman, and Lars Peter Larson was ordained in his stead. 1. The following is a statement by Carter Grant made to Apostle James E. Talmage on September 9, 1931. Brother Grant stated that from his investigations he found that Brother John H. Coyle and the directors and the secretary of the company, in June 1914, were called before Stake President Jonathan S. Page of the High Council of Nebo Stake, and that his action was taken by the direction of President Joseph F. Smith, then president of the church. Brother Coyle told Brother Grant that at the High Council meeting referred to, the president of the stake, Brother Page, told Brother Coyle that he had to close the mine down or lose his fellowship in the church in accordance with statements made by President Joseph F. Smith in his letters to President Jonathan S. Page. Brother Coyle stated that he asked President Page for time and that he be allowed to come to Salt Lake City, Utah, with President Page and relate his entire story to President Joseph F. Smith. Then Brother Coyle asked Press Page for a statement of the charges against him so that he would know against what he had to defend himself. Brother Coyle stated that the letter from President Joseph F. Smith was then read, in which the statement was made that Brother Coyle had stated that he was going to redeem all the dead and that he was going back to build up Jackson County, Missouri. The third charge or specification against Brother Coyle was not stated by Brother Grant as he could not remember it, but the fourth he remembered well, and that was to this effect, that Brother Coyle intended to increase the capital stock of the company and sell out and make himself. 1. Minutes of Weekly Meeting, Journal History, August 24, 1915, page 6. It is said that the members voted 100% to retain Coyle as bishop. Independently rich. These charges Brother Coyle denied and asked for the privilege of seeing President Joseph F. Smith himself. He was told that his request would be granted. Thereupon the High Council was dismissed. President Page later came to see President Smith according to Brother Grant, and President Smith stated that he did not wish to or care to meet Brother Coyle or talk with him about the dream mine in any phase whatsoever, but that he must close the mine and not sell any more stock or do any more work on the hill, or he would be disfellowshipped. 1. In July 1928, at the Nebo Stake Conference, Apostle James E. Talmage denounced all stock selling schemes in which the stock is sold with the idea that the enterprise is being directed by supernatural means, naming in particular the Coyle mine or dream mine as it is generally called. He urged members of the church to have nothing to do with such enterprises. He stated that he had gone through the Coyle mine some 12 years earlier by appointment of the first presidency, and at that time pronounced the property worthless. He was asked at the time if he was speaking as an apostle or a geologist. He declined to answer at first, but upon being pressed, emphatically declared that he spoke as an apostle and in the name of God. He then said, "I say to you that the misrepresentations which have been made in selling the stock of the Coyle mine are of the evil one. I come to you as a representative of the presidency and the quorum of the 12 to warn you against it. I warn the owners in the name of the Lord and as his apostle that it is barren and always will be. The church will not close this mine or any other mine or enterprise that is legal because the church will not interfere." 1. Grant, Statement, September 9, 1931, page 3. With private interests, but the church will take a decided stand against anybody who tries to induce others to buy stock on the representation that angels of God have revealed these things and that the proceeds are to be used for the building up of the church. Don't raise your hand to sustain the prophets of the Lord and authorities of the church unless you are willing to follow their counsel and advice. If ever there was a day when the church was led by the gift of revelation, it is this day. The authorities are not asking you to do anything that they are not doing themselves. They are leading and asking the membership to follow. 1. The church said very little about the mine for the next 17 years. In 1944, there was an increase in activity at the mine. By now the number of stockholders had increased to some 6,000 with about 600,000 shares distributed among them. The statement of the first presidency as published August 2, 1913, in the Deseret News, was republished as a renewed warning to the members on December 29, 1945. It was signed by the president of the church, George Albert Smith, J. Reuben Clark, and David O. McKay. 2. In September 1946, an editorial appeared in the church section of the Deseret News in answer to inquiries as to whether or not the church had changed its stand on the Coyle mine, and if Brother Talmage had admitted he was mistaken in what he had said about the mine. 3. 1. Spanish Fork Press, July 19, 1928, page 1. 2. Deseret News, Church Section, December 29, 1945, page 1. 3. Coyle reportedly made the statement that after Apostle James E. Talmage's death, Talmage appeared to him and admitted that he had been wrong about the mine and asked Coyle to forgive him. This Coyle did. At the time Talmage openly opposed the mine, Coyle is quoted as saying that the time would come when Talmage would admit that he was wrong and ask Coyle's forgiveness. It is possibly the report of this incident that caused the above-mentioned inquiries. Again, the members were warned against investing in enterprises such as the Coyle mine. A statement by Brother Talmage in which he renewed his stand against the mine was published in the Deseret News, May 14, 1928. The findings of Dr. Frederick J. Pack, the geologist, were again presented, and members were admonished to follow the counsel of the authorities in this matter. 1. On January 7, 1947, Coyle was called before the President and High Council of his stake, where a formal trial was held. All claims made in the past with respect to the mine were reviewed. As a result of this trial, Coyle signed a statement repudiating all divine claims with respect to his mine. 2. He accepted fully and completely the stand of the First Presidency regarding the mine and retracted all statements he had made in which he said the First Presidency was mistaken concerning this mine. He pledged complete support of the leaders of the church in all things and asked his followers to do the same. 3. This move by Coyle completely shocked his thousands of followers. The general feeling, however, soon existed that Coyle did not agree with what he had signed and had only done so in order to retain his membership in the church. Members of the mine leadership were soon pressing him to resume the holding of meetings and the taking care of an active part in the leadership of the mine. 4. Supposedly against his better judgment, Coyle accepted this counsel and was soon holding meetings contrary to the orders of the church. As a result of this, the First Presidency. 1. Deseret News, Church Section, September 7, 1946, page 1. 2. See signed statement by Coyle, Appendix by 3. Deseret News, January 8, 1947, PA 1. 4. See note in miscellaneous bibliography. Felt that action should be taken, and Apostle Mark E. Peterson was sent to Spanish Fork to help conduct the excommunication proceedings. The charges against Coyle were 1. Holding meetings wherein prayers were said, testimonies were borne, and the sacrament was passed. 2. Receiving revelation for the welfare of the church. 3. Continuing activity at the mine and holding meetings, after stating that he would not do so. On April 1, 1948, the trial was held, and Coyle was excommunicated from the church. The following article appeared in the Deseret News on the day following the trial. John H. Coyle of Spanish Fork, Utah, was excommunicated from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints last night on a charge of insubordination to the rules and authority of the church. Action was taken by the Presidency and High Council of the Palmyra Stake in a meeting held at the stake offices in Spanish Fork. 2. At the time of the trial, Coyle was a very sick man and had to be carried into the room where the trial was held. Throughout the trial, he had little to say, and there was much feeling for him among those present. As judgment was passed, however, Coyle rose to his feet and in a loud angry voice called down the judgments of heaven upon those trying him. After this outburst, it is reported that all feeling of sympathy towards him disappeared. 3. 1. Ibid. 2. The Deseret News, Friday, April 16, 1948, PB 1. 3. Note miscellaneous. After his excommunication, Coyle became sick both in body and spirit. He had lost the thing most precious to him, his membership in the church. In May 1949, he was taken to the Payson Hospital with a heart attack and died there on May 17, 1949. Since Coyle's death, active opposition to the mine has ceased. Nevertheless, the condemning words of the prophets and apostles during the past 50 years still stand and will continue to do so in the future. 1. Summary. From 1894 until his death in 1949, John H. Coyle fought a continual mental battle with himself. He was a devout Latter-day Saint. All of his 13 children were brought up as firm believers in Latter-day Saint doctrine. His testimony meant more than anything else to him. Nevertheless, he could not deny the many things which he had seen and experienced. As his sister one time stated, John didn't know what to do. He wanted to obey the authorities, yet he could not deny what had been revealed to him. We all felt sorry for him. 2. This same conflict has been, and still is experienced by most Dream Mine followers. Facts show that with but few exceptions, these people were members in good standing with the church. Opposition of the church to the mine and the excommunication of Coyle has caused most stockholders to take a wait-and-see attitude. Bitter feelings toward the church are in most cases non-existent. In fact, many hold 1. In opposition to this, Coyle is quoted as saying that there will come a time when the church and the mine leaders will be in perfect harmony. At this time, the mine will begin to produce. 2. Fillmore, interview, May 5, 1957. Responsible positions in the church and take the attitude that the church comes first in their lives. The prevailing feeling among stockholders seems to be that if Coyle was really directed from God, then everything will work out as it should. If his work was not from God, then he will be punished, but not severely, since he believed in complete faith and sincerity that his was a work ordained of God. 1. Marion Boyer of Springville, Utah, longtime friend of Coyle and a steadfast member of the church, had this to say in regard to the relationship of the church and the mine. If the mine is God-inspired, then the stand taken by the church is a wise one. Since the church had to take some view, whether positive or negative, on so controversial an issue, it was to the advantage of the mine when it took a negative stand. Had the church sanctioned the mine, then stock would have been bought by many thousands of fortune-seeking members who, desirous of immediate returns, would never have had the patience and faith which the now more than 60 years would have required of them. Under such conditions, the mine could never fulfill its destiny. If the mine is not of God, then the stand of the church was a necessary and correct one. The dream mine has been no rich man's folly. Coyle started digging a poor man, and he died a poor man. He went through many years of persecution and ridicule for a dream that for him never came true. His wife, when asked whether the whole thing had not been an ordeal for her, had the following to say: "I have wished many times, and so have the children, that John had never had a dream about the mountain and the ore. For years now, we have had." 1. Note, miscellaneous. People coming to our house at all hours, eager to learn all about the latest details. Some believe while others ridicule. 1. It's been no fun, I can tell you. The children have been laughed at in school. The state is trying to close the mine. The authorities of the church are preaching against it. They have released John twice from church offices he held, and altogether we have had about all we can stand. Still, we don't hold any feelings against anyone, for it does look ridiculous and unbelievable, all right. I guess I wouldn't believe it either if I didn't see so many things coming true that John predicts. 2. The mine is known throughout most of the western states and is a topic worthy of argument wherever it is discussed. The lives of many thousands have been and continue to be affected by it. Very little material has ever been published about the mine. Several articles are now being written for publication, but they are being held back until the success of the mine is evident. A number of poems have been compassed about the mine, but have never been published. 3. 1. A well-known story which illustrates this point is told of a man who was prone to drink to excess. One day during the Prohibition era he was being shown the mine by Brother Coyle. All points of interest were shown him, and as they came out of the tunnel, Coyle asked, "Well, brother, what do you think of it?" Looking down from the mouth of the tunnel one has a complete view of the valley below. Pointing to the vast fields of ripening grain in the valley, the man answered, "See those fields of grain down there? See that fine stream of water you have here? I think that with that grain down there and this water up here, your mine would be a wonderful place for a whiskey still." Coyle said, "Brother, you don't have the spirit." The man answered, "I would if I had a still up here." 2. Pierce, page 15. 3. See poems in Appendix 6. What the future of the mine will be, no one can say. If, however, one accepts Coyle as a prophet, then the future of the mine is a certainty. One day, a day in the not-too-distant future, according to someone, the Coyle Relief Mine will become the richest mine in the world. This will be a day of famine and starvation, halted transportation, and great confusion throughout the land. The United States government will be forced off the gold standard, and the mine will help meet its demands. 2. Enormous grain bins will be built at the mine and filled with an abundance of grain for the preservation of the saints. A bank will be built at the mine which supposedly will be the only one existing in the United States. At the foot of the mountain near the mine, a beautiful white city will be built. It will be a model city in which the United Order will be practiced. Only the pure in heart will be permitted to live in this city, and from it will the saints be sent to Jackson County, Missouri, to build up Zion, the New Jerusalem. 3. In regard to the above, we can refer to the statement of a man closely connected to the mine: if it is of God, then it will produce, and all will be fulfilled. If not, then it will eventually die as did its founder. Either way we can do nothing but wait and see. 4. 1. Note miscellaneous. 2. Marion Boyer, personal interview, April 30, 1907. Mr. Boyer relates that just before Coyle died, they were riding together in a car. Coyle made the statement that the time would come when the mine would help the U.S. government meet financial obligations. 3. Pierce, interview, May 10, 1957. 4. Note miscellaneous. Chapter 5. Full Dreams and Empty Minds. By John R. Christensen. The following article was printed in a magazine called Mountain West, Vol. 6, Number 2, pages 26 to 30, which was published monthly in Provo, Utah. Full Dreams and Empty Minds. By John R. Christensen. As you travel near Spanish Fork in South Utah County and look eastward toward the mountains, the mill can be seen quite easily. In fact, it can be seen from as far away as Provo. The long, white, concrete structure seems to cling tenaciously to the mountainside. Scattered beneath it are other, more conventional buildings, and below them are terraces which are now being developed into fruit orchards and grain fields. This singular view has likely sparked many conversations among people traveling by, such as, "Daddy, what is that white building up there on the mountain?" "Where, son?" "Oh, over there." "Why, that's the Dream Mine." "The Dream Mine? What's that?" "Well, son, I'm not too sure, but some man had a dream about there being a lot of gold in that mountain, so he started up there to get it out." "No kidding, Dad? Did he get the gold?" "Well, I really don't know, but I don't think so." While some people know more about the Dream Mine than this father, many people know even less. For instance, how many people know that the Dream Mine may have been the largest cooperative movement in the history of Utah? Yet, though operated mostly by Mormons, the mine was never officially sanctioned by the Mormon Church. In fact, the church generally disapproved of it for many years. Likewise, how many people know that the fantastic mix of fact and folklore that is the Dream Mine story centers on the religious dreams of an unassuming farm boy from Spanish Fork? To be sure, the Orthodox Mormon theology that provided the basic values of that boy, John H. Coyle, had a visionary basis. Scriptural as well as contemporary stories reinforced his own experiences. The boy believed and viewed as a model the biblical story of Joseph who was sold into Egypt. Young Coyle knew that Joseph was able to interpret the Pharaoh's dreams and had implemented a welfare program to provide food for Egypt's population during a 7-year famine. In addition, Coyle's contemporary, Jesse Knight, had also experienced spiritual manifestations through dreams which resulted in fame and riches. That happened in 1896, just 2 years after John Coyle received his first spiritual manifestation. Through the information provided by it, Knight located a mine site near Eureka, sank a shaft, and struck a rich ore body which he immediately and appropriated named the Humbug Mine. This rich glory hole raised him from being a pauper with less than $100 to one of the most wealthy men in the Tintic mining district. News of this and subsequent fabulous mining finds of Jesse Knight were the talk of the West, including, of course, Spanish Fork, located just 35 miles to the east. Not lost on the keen and impressionable mind of John Coyle was the fact that Uncle Jesse's successful mining ventures made him an even more respected and valuable member of the Mormon Church. He was reputed to have been the largest tithe payer in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for many years. His generous contributions to Brigham Young University enabled that school and many of its students to survive financial crises. An exemplary Mormon in other ways too, Knight built a 65-home town on a flat near the Humbug Mine. It was without a saloon. He also encouraged his employees, most of whom were Mormons, to attend church by closing the mine on Sundays. To keep their pay up with the surrounding miners, he paid them more during the week. This generosity and strict adherence to religious values were thought of as eccentricities in the mining world, but throughout the Mormon Church Uncle Jesse became famous as a man who followed the admonition to live in the world, but be not of it. John Coyle's life was to parallel that of Jesse Knight's in many ways, but to differ from it tragically as well. But what about John Coyle's dream in the Dream Mine? In August 1894, Coyle received the dream which was to change his life and that of many others. Over the years, Coyle related to thousands of people that a personage dressed in white and radiating light appeared to him in a dream. This person conducted him in spirit to the mountain, where the mine is now located. He was conducted to a certain elevation on the mountainside, where the earth parted before them, and they entered into the mountain without any apparent resistance. The geologic features of the mountain's interior were explained to him in considerable detail by the radiant personage. Moreover, the riches of the mountain were described as being known to ancient people as well. His radiant guide led Coyle into the mountain and explained to him how he would find the rich ore inside the mountain. The route Coil was to follow parallel to cream-colored vein. This letter vein continued more than 1,000 feet to a very hard capstone layer of stone covering a large body of rich white quartz containing leaf gold. Beneath this ore body were 9 large rooms from which the ore had already been mined by ancient inhabitants of this land, Nephites. Coyle related that large pillars were in these rooms. Their roofs were filled with gold and were beautifully carved and engraved. There was other gold inside the rooms, both bulk and coined, and there were implements and relics left there, as well as precious records containing the word of God in great power. From these rooms Coyle recounted that he was taken southwest through a steep tunnel that had been made by the same ancients. This tunnel came out in Water Canyon, which is the first large canyon south of the mill. From this canyon, the remains of an ancient Nephite highway running south in a huge crescent over to the point of Payson Canyon were shown Coyle. The role that the mine would play in his own life, in the lives of others, and the Mormon Church were impressed upon Coyle during that first dream. The mine would be richer than anything like it in the whole world. However, the big deposits of valuable ore he had seen would not be reached and released until a time of great worldwide crises. Then the people and the Mormon Church would be sorely in need of relief. The mine would then be called the Relief Mine. In September of 1894 work began on the mine as directed and spiritual manifestations received after the first dream. Coyle and others claimed to find evidence of the veracity of the visions through the discovery of the prophesied cream-colored leader. Immediately, 18 mining claims were staked in the El Dorado mining district of Utah County, Utah. The names given the claims were Relief Number 1, Relief Number 2, and so on through 18. Following the spread of the news that Coyle's claim to a fantastic dream mine had been supported by the discovery of a vein, people began coming to the Coyle property and listening to his remarkable account. When the first major excavation was to begin, therefore, it was not difficult to locate sufficient men to help in uncovering the alleged riches. During these early years, the mine was not incorporated, and no stock or interest sold. It was assumed that the volunteer workers would be treated as Coyle's partners. It was apparent that Coyle expected the mine to begin producing at a very early date. A statement indicating this optimism was made by his nephew, John F. Warner, who said, "My father went to the mine to work in 1895. One week he had to stay home because mother was ill. Uncle John Coyle came by and urgently remarked, 'We may strike it this week and you won't be there.' Of course they didn't strike it. And they had not struck it by 1909 when it became evident that the few men who remained working at the mine would not be able to continue the work. These workers had received no returns from their efforts, and more men and money were necessary if the work were to continue. Therefore, on March 4, 1909, the Coyle Mining Company was incorporated. John H. Coyle was listed as president and director of the corporation and given 13,500 shares. He was also listed as trustee with 49,500 shares. Other faithful workers were given positions and shares, and 42,000 shares of treasury stock were put up for sale with a par value of $1 per share. It would seem that in such a speculative venture, 42,000 shares of treasury stock and whatever personal stock the owners wanted to sell would be difficult to market. This was not the case. With the promise of immediate returns, quoted as high as 750 to 1, the available stock still sold fast. Soon the amount of treasury stock was increased to 114,000 shares and sold. Stock salesmen went from door to door in some places. By this time interest in the mine had spread throughout the state. Persons from Logan, Ogden, and Salt Lake City and other communities traveled to the mine and listened to the remarkable orations of its founder. Prospective stockholders were encouraged to obtain at least 100 shares of stock at $1.50 per share. It was expected that the value of a single share would go up to $1,000, and just 100 shares would be enough to sustain a family. By December 1913, the shaft was 1,400 feet deep. Progress had become slow and difficult. The narrowness of the long shaft, its length, which required 11 windlasses to lift each bucket, and water seeping into it made the work slow and arduous. It was decided to drive a tunnel horizontally into the mountain to connect with and drain the near vertical shaft. Ignoring advice from geologists and others, Coyle ordered that the tunnel be started at a place he had seen in another dream. Tunnel work began according to Coyle's instructions. On January 10, 1914, Coyle declared that he had been visited by 2 personages in an unusual dream. These people, later identified by Coyle as 2 of the 3 Nephites, affirmed that the new tunnel had been started correctly and that all he would see in the dream would be fulfilled. The first half hour of the dream dealt with the operation of the mine and indicated that opposition from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormon, could be expected. The remaining 1.5 hours of the dream, Coyle stated, contained information which should be given only to the First Presidency, the highest leadership body of the Mormon Church. 6 months after the appearance to Coyle of the two Nephites, a part of the dream was fulfilled. The Mormon Church brought pressure to bear on the mine owners and all operations ceased. These pressures were exerted for two reasons. First, Coyle claimed to receive revelations, not only concerning himself and the mine, but for the affairs of others. Second, some of Coyle's revelations had linked the future of the LDS Church to that of the mine. Not opposed to personal revelations among its members, the church did oppose revelations which extended into areas where individuals were not authorized to administer. The mine remained inoperative for about 5 years. Then the LDS Church, in 1920, granted a request by the Coyle Mining Company to permit persons to operate it without jeopardizing their church membership. To do this, the operation was to be conducted as any normal mining venture, exclusive of supernatural allegations. So, mining continued. At no time, however, did appreciable amounts of valuable ore ever come out of the shaft or tunnel. The only rewards received by the faithful were the occasional fulfillments of Coyle's continued prophecies. However, in 1929 the faithful were rewarded, and the skeptics silenced, even though briefly. The Spanish Fork Press announced that the mine's operators had struck platinum. J.W. Wharf, company assayer, had determined that ore samples brought from a side drift contained 0.3% and more in platinum. The report thrilled Coyle. His years of waiting were over. The mine had come in. Such was the demand of the stock that a single share sold for $5. About the time all available stock had been sold, however, reports were received indicating that the original assay estimates were incorrect. Trying to be fair, Coyle gave an additional share of stock for each one the speculators had purchased during the boom. The quick boom and bust left even more people disillusioned in Coyle and his dreams, yet there followed a series of prophecies from him which renewed the faith of the believers. Among these included a prophecy concerning the stock market crash of 1929. With the money generated by the fulfillment of this prophecy, the white flotation mill, so readily visible on the mountainside, was built. However, one disappointment at the mine followed another. At least twice, expensive equipment was installed to process promised high-grade ore, but again the ore proved to be low-grade. By 1944, these repeated failures had left the old bishop, as Coyle was called by close associates, exasperated. He was now 80 years old and had been trying to bring the mine in for 48 years. It had become increasingly difficult to convince people that his dreams were true. Many once loyal and prominent supporters had renounced their belief in the mine, and some even denounced Coyle and fellow operators as charlatans. The most disastrous blow to Coyle, however, concerned his standing in the Mormon Church. Earlier, in 1913, Coyle was released from his church position as bishop of the Leland Ward. This release followed the publication of a statement called the Warning Voice by President Joseph F. Smith, then president of the church. This statement presented the church's position on the dream mine. Part of it read, "No person has the right to induce his fellow members of the church to engage in speculations or take stock in ventures of any kind on the serious claim of divine revelation or vision or dream, especially when it is in opposition to the voice of recognized authority, local or general." Although released as bishop, Coyle was still a member of the church and seemingly took the release in stride. Repeatedly during the years following, however, the LDS Church issued statements concerning the mine, and some of its highest officials presented sermons regarding it as well. These statements were unequivocal in their denunciation of the spiritual basis of the mine. Nevertheless, many of those closely connected with the mine seemed somewhat oblivious to these warnings and continued to promote the sale of stock based on excitement generated by the successful predictions made by the old bishop from time to time. On January 7, 1947, Coyle was called before local church authorities, and a formal church court was held. Reportedly, he was informed that he would have to either repudiate his divine claims regarding the mine, support the stand of the First Presidency regarding it, and retract all statements wherein he said the church leadership was mistaken concerning him and his work, or be excommunicated from the LDS Church. Faced with the ultimatum, Coyle signed a prepared statement indicating his willingness to conform to the required conditions. However, misunderstandings connected with the trial further embittered the old bishop and his loyal followers. It was not long before he ignored the request made of him. Weekly meetings, called testimony meetings by detractors, were again held at the mine and activities proceeded at an accelerated rate. Thus, on April 1, 1948, another trial was held in Spanish Fork, and the ultimate disciplinary power of the LDS Church was exercised. Coyle was excommunicated. On the day following the trial, the Deseret News reported the incident and stated that the action was taken for insubordination to the rules and authority of the Church. Following his excommunication, Coyle continued to take an active part in the mine's operations. But he rapidly became a disheartened and broken man. Early in 1948 he contracted an illness which led to his death on May 17, 1949. Shortly following the death of its founder and namesake, the Coyle Mining Company was closed. Except for the caretaker and an occasional trespasser, the next 6 years of the mine's history consisted of work done on the annual $8,000 assessment assigned to the property. In 1961, however, a new corporation was formed. The Relief Mine Company was organized with Quayle Dixon, a faithful follower of Coyle, as president. Old stock was exchanged and new stock issued. The officers of the new company appear to generally follow and believe in the goals and aspirations of the old bishop, but are careful to limit themselves to activities perceived by the Mormon Church as acceptable. Assessment work is being carried out, together with some further exploratory mining and farming on the increasingly valuable land. A new office has been built next to the vacant home built by the old company for John H. Coyle. Today some of the more than 8,000 stockholders of the Relief Mine Company view the lengthening years since Coyle's first dream, the empty mine shafts and tunnel, the rusting tracks and mine cars, and the ever-present mine assessments as increasing proof that the old bishop was indeed deluded. On the other hand, many of the faithful perceive the world's troubled condition as fulfillment of Coyle's prophecies, and each passing year is bringing them just that much closer to the time when the mine will come in. For them, that time is close at hand. Very, very close. Chapter 6. Utah Valley's Dream Mine yields a 24 KT. Controversy. By Monty Bona. This article was printed in Monday Magazine, Monday, January 13, 1975, pages 16 to 17. Utah Valley's Dream Mine yields a 24 KT. Controversy. By Monty Bona, Monday Magazine writer. A crisp, wintry wind cuts through the sagebrush and briskly works its way from Salem to Payson, Utah. Norman Pierce, gray hair tousling in the wind, sport jacket flapping like a ship's sails, points his finger at the farmland terrain. "There's where the old Nephite highway ran from the Dream Mine to the smelter over in Payson Canyon," he says. Pierce, a former school teacher and author of a book called The Dream Mine Story, is just one of many people who for the past 7 decades have been fascinated by Utah County's so-called Dream Mine. In recent months, however, interest in the mine has taken on new dimensions with links to gold, the dollar's decline, and, yes, spaceships and legends of the Hopi Indians. Where did it all begin? It started near the turn of the century with the dream of John Coyle. Coyle, Spanish Fork's man of predictions, had established himself long before anyone had heard of Gene Dixon, or most folks in Spanish Fork knew the meaning of Spanish pesetas. Bishop Coyle, he served as an LDS bishop in Spanish Fork for many years, often had visitors at his door who wanted to know about a son's well-being in the trenches of France or the future of the economy during the dark days of the Depression. His dream about the mine in the hills of Salem, however, led to his being accused of fraud and deception and his ultimate excommunication from the LDS Church. What were the details of this dream which carried so heavy a penalty? Coyle claimed to have received precise information about the location of a rich lode in the mountains near Salem, Utah. This ore, Coyle declared, was located in an ancient mine tracing back to the Nephites of the Book of Mormon. Coyle said he had seen in a vision 9 large rooms from which the ore had been mined. In these rooms, he claimed, was gold, both mined, refined and coined. From 1894 to the present, Coyle's Dream Mine, from time to time, has been the center of debate. Indeed, there has been much controversy, but no gold. Thousands of people bought stock in the mine. Some believed in Coyle's prophecies, not only about the mine, but also predictions about the building of White City in the foothills near the mine. It would be, Coyle said, a gathering place for the elect in the last days. Still others purchased stock without accepting Coyle's far-reaching revelations. These were men such as the late Douglas Dixon, a Payson businessman who became a director in the company, as did Raymond Steele, a Goshen school teacher and historian. The late James E. Talmage, LDS apostle and geologist, entered into the Dream Mine debate. In 1928, Dr. Talmage rendered a scientific opinion that the mine would never be capable of producing valuable ore of any kind. Yet, the more tenacious of the Dream Mine followers continued to hang on, despite John Coyle's excommunication from the LDS Church and the subsequent failure of the mine to produce gold. New chapter. This past September, however, a new chapter in the Dream Mine story began with the arrival in Utah County of Paul Solemn, sometimes referred to as the Flying Saucer Prophet. Solemn is not actually associated with the officers of the Relief Mine Company, the current official name of the Dream Mine. But he shows an intense interest in the old Coyle story. Solemn, whose record of alleged contact with UFOs goes back to his ranch in Howe, Idaho, in 1948, reports he was told by his contacts from outer space to hold 5 meetings near the Dream Mine. The so-called celestial visitors, he says, would hover 150 feet above the mine. According to Solemn, the full purpose of the visits from outer space will be revealed at a later date. It seems clear to Solemn that a connection exists between the Dream Mine visit and an earlier experience he had with the Hopi Indians in 1970. He claims contacts with the Venusians led him to Hopeville, Arizona, where he met Chief Dan Kachangwa, a 108-year-old leader of the Hopi Sun clan. Flying saucers are legendary among many Hopi Indians. In fact, they believe they were led northward into what is now the United States by the Kachinas, powerful and intelligent beings from another planet. In 1970, shortly after Paul Solom's arrival in Hopeville, UFOs were reportedly sighted over Prescott, Arizona. One eyewitness was Joe Kraus, editor of the Prescott Courier. Kraus, not a man easily taken in, reported he saw an object in the sky. It maneuvered, Kraus said, hovered and then disappeared. It changed colors from a white to a reddish-orange, to a purplish-blue and a reddish-white, and then it was gone, Kraus claimed. Pictures on stone. This appearance was not surprising to Chief Dan, who said, "We have seen the flying saucers and have heard their message to us. We know they are real because their pictures were drawn upon stone for all to see." Perhaps, say Solemn's followers, etching in stone at the Dream Mine so-called hieroglyphics discounted by many observers provide the link between the saucer prophet's stay with the Hopis and his coming to the Dream Mine. Solemn believes there may be some connection, but he is not certain. "All I know," he says, "was I was told of 5 passes." On October 20, 1974, about 6,000 people showed up at the Dream Mine site, but, Solemn said, because of the weather, there was no appearance. On November 10, he continued, some fast passes were made. On December 8, 1974, Solemn and his UFO enthusiasts returned to the Dream Mine site. Snow had fallen on the road to the mine, and the way to the gathering spot was slippery and cold. The large bonfire was a welcome sight to the 60 or so faithful who had met to await the mysterious meanderings of the extraterrestrial visitors. This and a similar gathering on December 15 produced eyewitnesses who claimed to have seen UFOs above the mine and strange objects in the sky. Many of these people are down-to-earth people like Springville's Frank Holly. Holly also claims to have seen a flying saucer with Solemn on Thanksgiving evening, 1974. Utah's UFOs. Even the more cynical might experience a moment of wonderment when Solemn's descriptions about UFOs are related with what biologist Frank Salisbury has written in his book, The Utah UFO Display. In this book, Salisbury presents a systematic study of UFO sightings in the Uinta Basin area. He subjects his study to a rigorous scientific investigation, and his interviews with witnesses demonstrate the thoroughness of his approach. Salisbury classified the reliability of his witnesses as excellent, maintains that the findings are hardly a psychological phenomena, and concludes it is virtually inconceivable that the Uinta Basin UFO sightings are a hoax. Says he, "I believe I have been forced into it by the data on hand, that the people of the Uinta Basin have indeed seen real objects I cannot explain in terms of any of the artifacts of men, or the natural events known to this science. I cannot think of any reasonable explanation of the object sighted in the Uinta Basin, except extraterrestrial machines." But why the Uinta Basin, Salisbury asks. Here, he concludes, science leaves us, and we can only make the purest of conjectures with no assurance whatsoever of their validity. Have they been making a survey? Too confident. Where science leaves us, and where Salisbury drops any conjectures, Paul Solemn enters with alacrity. His voice is devoid of hesitancies, and he speaks with much assurance. That may be why some find it hard to believe him. He sounds too confident, it is said. He believes the surveys are being made by visitors who represent the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Utah, he says, plays a vital role in their return. And the dream mine, while solemn, is not yet sure of its ultimate role in the scheme of things, will supposedly link everything together in some logical way. Chapter 7. Dream Mine. By Edna G. Brockbank. The source for the following article is Hidden Treasures of Pioneer History, Vol. I, pages 204 to 206. Dream Mine. By Edna G. Brockbank. The relief mine, or dream mine, as it later became known, was located during the winter of 1894-95 by John H. Coyle, Joseph, and Samuel Brockbank, B.F. Woodward, Howell Davis and Albert Coyle. It was not located because of any indication that mineral was present, but because of a dream or vision which John H. Coyle received in June 1894, in which he stated that a man appeared to him and conducted him to the spot where the mine was afterward located. They went down into the ground, as if the shaft and tunnel were already excavated, and Mr. Coyle was shown, as he declared, all the various formations through which the miners would pass in the natural course of mining. In accordance to the dream, Mr. Coyle explained the dream or vision to Joseph Brockbank, who accompanied him to the mountain east of Salem, Utah County, where a peculiarly formed foothill appeared to lie against the base of a larger mountain. After inspecting the place for some time, the exact spot shown in the dream was found, and the claim was staked out. The other 4 original locators became interested in the venture, and mining operations were commenced by the sinking of an inclined shaft for 40 feet. At that depth, Mr. Coyle informed his co-laborers they would encounter a certain formation. This proving true, they were instructed to change the direction of the shaft and dig another 40 feet, at which point they would strike another formation. This proceeding was continued during the winter until 1911, the men working on their farms and at other work during the summer and digging at the mine through the winter. After 1911, others became interested, and the work proceeded the year around. By January 1914, the shaft was sunk to a depth of 1,385 feet. In the meantime, in accordance with the dream, it was decided to discontinue operations in the shaft and drive a tunnel from the bottom of the hill. By March 1929, the workings consisted of the shaft, the tunnel which was into the mountain 30-40 feet, a winze 200 feet deep located in the tunnel about 1,300 feet from the mouth, several hundred feet of drift into small glory hole. By this time the mine had attracted much notoriety in the state as well as out of it. The Coyle Mining Company had been formed, and stock was in great demand. Meetings were being held where more than 1,000 people gathered. At one of these meetings, held September 7, 1931, they listened for several hours to a program where a few short talks by officials of the mine were given. It might have been called a gathering of the faithful and the faithless, as the crowd was divided between stockholders and the curious. In the crowd were many saints from the Swiss-German missions of the LDS Church. The huge crowd was brought to attention by a bugle call from high on the mountain. The Salem band played a selection from about the same position. 37 shots were fired, 1 for each year that the mine had been in existence. A trombone and cornet duet, "Oh, Ye Mountains High," was played from high on the hillside. After the opening exercises, a program was given in a splendid Bowery, where seats had been hauled to accommodate nearly 1,000 people. This lasted until 12:30. Nearly everyone had provided themselves with a basket lunch, and a lunch stand had also been built which was well patronized. At 2 p.m., another 2.5-hour program was given. In his speech, John H. Coyle, founder and discoverer of the mine, retold the story of his dream and stated that it was exactly 37 years to the day since the first 6 men came on the hill and began working. He also said that after 37 years of work on the mine, the company was not in debt to any extent. The church and the state became concerned because of the mine workings. The Utah Security Board ordered an investigation. Dr. Frederick J. Pack, representing the state of Utah, visited the mine and took one set of 8 samples from the property, had them tested, and at the conclusion of his report, summarized conditions at the mine in the following words: "In conclusion, I desire to state that in my judgment the Coyle mining property offers no encouragement whatsoever for the future. While its formations adjacent to the Great Wasatch Fault are intimately displaced fractures, yet evidences of commercial mineralization are wholly lacking." The LDS Church sent James E. Talmage to investigate conditions, and his opinion was the same as Dr. Pack. Despite these and other investigations, the work at the mine continued apace. An assay office was built, ore bins were constructed, and later a mill erected at a cost of $43,000. A road 2/3 up the mountainside was built leading to iron prospects. The stockholders built a small cottage for Mr. Coyle and his family to occupy. Mr. Coyle was excommunicated from the LDS Church in July 1948 for insubordination and refusal to acknowledge the established order and authority of the church. His working of the dream mine as a mine had nothing whatsoever to do with his excommunication. Mr. Coyle was in effect operating as a ward of the church, holding testimony and other meetings, not only without the consent of the local authorities, but contrary to their counsel and direction. John H. Coyle died May 17, 1949, at the age of 84 years. While the company was organized and operated 55 years, the mine had always been on a prospect basis. Dividends of any kind had never been issued. Since Mr. Coyle's death, practically no work has been done at the mine. Chapter 8. Utah's Dream Mine Lives On. By Diane Butler Christensen. Diane Butler Christensen is a freelance writer living in Provo. Her article appeared in the Utah County Journal, December 13, 1989. Utah's Dream Mine Lives On. By Diane Butler Christensen. One night late in August 1894, a Leland farmer named John Coyle lay down to sleep and subsequently opened one of the most controversial chapters in Utah County history. Coyle claimed the next morning that he had been visited in a dream by an angelic messenger, the same angel Moroni that had appeared to Joseph Smith. This angel, he went on to relate, had taken him to a mountain east of Salem and had shown him, inside the mountain, an extremely rich vein of gold ore. In addition, Coyle claimed to have seen 9 chambers containing piles of gold, treasures, implements and ancient Nephite records. Coyle fervently believed he was given, that night, a sacred assignment to begin mining operations to reach these fabulous riches. The gold would not be used for his personal wealth, but for the relief of the LDS people who would be in need of food and other commodities during a time of drought and world upheaval soon to come. A few days later, Coyle took a friend, Joseph Brockbank, up to the mountain. They found a spot Coyle said he recognized from his dream and started digging. Coyle began telling about his vision to all who would listen, and soon he had hundreds of people interested in his venture. Why would people accept so willingly a story so outlandish? First, John Coyle was no wild-eyed fanatic. He was a well-respected member of the community and was considered a man of integrity. Coyle's last living child, Mrs. Homer Harwood, avers, "There was no better man living than my father. He was a man who fulfilled his obligations to the church and to everyone." Apparently, many others felt the same. Coyle had never made a secret of the fact that he believed passionately in personal revelation. He claimed, for instance, that he had been directed in 1891 by a heavenly voice to go on an LDS mission to the southern states. Further, this was an era in LDS history when spiritual manifestations that might seem bizarre now were accepted as commonplace. Meetings where early saints spoke and sang in tongues, women gave blessings to one another, and the future was prophesied, are well documented. John Coyle's vision was not at first considered to be outrageous in any sense. It comes as no surprise, then, that members of the Mormon Church flocked to Salem to buy shares in the John Coyle Mining Company, or the Dream Mine, as it was popularly known, and to help dig the mine shaft itself. Norman Pierce, an avid supporter and contemporary of Coyle, chronicled these events in a book, The Dream Mine Story. Pierce claimed that John Coyle was supported fully by his stake president, Jonathan Page. Coyle was, in fact, called to be bishop of the Leland Ward, near Spanish Fork, around 1910, when mining operations were in full swing. Pierce further states that Coyle received support from members in high positions of church leadership, such as J. Golden Kimball, who served with Elder Coyle as a missionary in the Southern States Mission, Matthias F. Cowley, and Anthony W. Ivins. If John Coyle had stopped with one vision, he might have remained in good graces with the LDS Church. He continued to make prophecy after prophecy, however, regarding world and church events. He also held, in his adobe farmhouse, meetings every Thursday evening. The meetings, which had the flavor and fervency of testimony meetings, were about the mine and Coyle's visions. He began very quickly to alienate and anger the first presidency of the church. In 1912, President Joseph F. Smith sent Apostle Francis M. Lyman to investigate John Coyle's claims and activities. Coyle was released post-haste from his calling as bishop and was directed to cease all mining operations or be excommunicated from the church. As a final blow, the First Presidency published a letter ominously titled A Warning Voice in the Deseret News. The letter alerted church members to the dangers of being led astray by anyone claiming the gift of prophecy for the entire church. Coyle obediently closed the mine and moved to Idaho for several years. In 1920, however, President Heber J. Grant allowed Coyle and his supporters to reopen the mine so that the corporation might settle some outstanding debts. The dream mine went back into operation, with John Coyle in full cry, prophesying not only about his pet project, but about a variety of local, church-wide and nationwide events. Untold amounts of money and time were poured into working the mine. 3 young men were killed in mining accidents. Coyle's popularity waxed and waned among the LDS population of the area, and the LDS general authorities took an increasingly dim view of John Coyle, his mine, his prophecies, and his Thursday night meetings. No gold was found during all this feverish activity. A small pocket of platinum was discovered, which caused hysterical excitement for a few weeks, but the pocket turned out to be essentially worthless. The first presidency of the church ran the warning voice letter 2 more times in the Deseret News, the last time in 1945 over the signature of George Albert Smith. In 1947, an 82-year-old John Coyle signed an official letter repudiating his prophetic claims regarding the mine. He agreed to cease mining operations and cancel his Thursday night meetings. He hoped to avoid excommunication from the church by doing these things, but within 2 weeks he had begun holding the meetings again and was excommunicated. He died 2 years later. The mine shut down a second time with Coyle's death, but the enterprise is anything but dead. Ask lifelong residents of the Salem Spanish Fork area and they will know many people who own shares in the mine, if they don't have a few shares themselves. There continues to this day an active board of directors. They prefer to call their nearly 100-year-old dream child the Relief Mine, and its corporate name has been changed accordingly. Their belief holds strong that the revenues from the mine's gold ore will buy tons of commodities, which will come to the relief of beleaguered LDS people in the times of distress to come. Mr. Stan Wheeler, current president of the board of directors, speaks cautiously about the continued involvement of himself and other board members in the mine. He says all board members are active in the LDS faith and believe President Benson is our prophet. We are not claiming revelation. Wheeler says the board currently directs only development work and no mining. He also reports that the board has rejected apostate groups and individuals who would like to become involved with the mine, naming such notorious examples as Ron and Ann Lafferty and the Singer clan. And yet, Wheeler and other board members cling fast to John Coyle's words that their beloved mine will be a success. Wheeler says proudly, "In due time we will be able to ship ore." The devotion of these people to their belief in that original vision is shown in their careful upkeep of the property. Geologists are called in periodically for consultation. The records are maintained carefully, and the office is up to date, complete with telephones, electric typewriters, and a computer system. The mine continues to be a consuming interest in the lives of the board members and others who hold shares of stock. And after all, why not? You gotta have your dreams. Oops. Chapter 9. A Relief Mine Story. By Jesse L. Young. Brigham Young once said, "When the agricultural resources of Utah are exhausted, the Lord will raise up a farmer to open up some rich mining claims for the benefit of Zion, and that the angels have charge of the riches of the earth and they can move them about as easily as I can walk to and fro in this aisle." In the Doctrine and Covenants, Sec. 38v39, the Lord said, "And if ye seek the riches which it is the will of the Father to give unto you, ye shall be the richest of all people, for ye shall have the riches of eternity, and it must needs be that the riches of the earth are mine to give. But beware of pride, lest ye become as the Nephites of old." When John H. Coyle was a small boy he went to the mouth of Spanish Fork Canyon with his father to get a load of rock with which to build a house. His father took a bar and pried a rock loose, and a slug of rocks caved off, killing him and rolling all around John, who was climbing up the steep slope. John's life was spared for a purpose by the Lord. On another occasion John was walking along the road behind a wagon. The wheels ran over a big rattlesnake, cutting it in half, and when John came near the snake, it struck him on the leg. They sucked the venom out and he recovered. This was one of many incidents when his life was spared. The Lord had a work for him to do. When John grew up, he got married and lived in Leland. One day he went to conference. The speaker said, "If you want a testimony of the gospel, ask the Lord for it, pray in secret." This John did for a year, but didn't get his testimony. He went to conference again and the speaker said, "If you do not forgive one another their trespasses, the Lord will not forgive you and will not hear your prayers." John said, "I have not done that, but I will now," and he did. He had a heifer that had been lost for 3 weeks. He searched everywhere but found no trace of her. So he did a little more praying. He then dreamed that, if he would go down to the railroad crossing near his farm at 10 o'clock the next day, he would find his cow, with her horn broken and sticking down into her eye. Then he was asked, "If you find this heifer as shown, will you believe in the Lord and the gospel? Will this be a testimony to you?" He said, "Yes." Next morning he got on his horse, rode down to the track, and there was his heifer just as he saw her in the dream. He was so pleased and thankful for the testimony that he promised the Lord he would serve him in whatsoever capacity the Lord may require. John next dreamed that he was to go on a mission for the church. "Will you go?" To which he said, "Yes." It was not long after that he got a letter from Box B. This was the official church mailing address. It was a call to a mission to the southern states. He went to the house to tell his wife, "I'm going on a mission." She said, "You can't go on a mission. You haven't any money." But he said, "I'll go. The Lord will provide." He had 4 or 5 head of cattle, and a voice said to him, "Kill 2 of your steers and sell the meat to your friends and neighbors." The Icelanders in Spanish Fork whom Bishop had befriended gladly bought quarters of the meat to divide among themselves. That furnished the money for him to go. He went and had a lot of wonderful spiritual experiences concerning the work. Once he was warned of mob violence which was planned against them. This was avoided by giving heed to his warnings. Some surveyors had gone through his farm laying out a line for a new railroad which would cut his farm in two. He prayed for the Lord to change their plans, and he did. They pulled up their stakes and made a new line, missing his farm completely. All of these wonderful experiences were for the preparation and strengthening of John Coyle to meet the requirements and responsibility of his great mission with the relief mine, which was to bring relief to a suffering people in time of great suffering, hunger and want. The time had come for his great work to commence. An angel appeared to him and announced his mission and call from the Lord. He said, "The Lord has called you to open up a rich gold mine for the benefit of Zion and the world in a time of trouble such as the world has not known. This time of trouble will be ushered in by a financial crash. We go to bed at night and awake in the morning with no light, water, gas or heat. The money will become worthless, not worth the paper it is written on. An armful would not buy a loaf of bread." Brother Coyle was overwhelmed at the great responsibility and began to offer all manner of reasons why someone else with mining experience that knew all about mining should be called. The angel said the Lord can't use one who knows everything. He must have one who does not know all things, one that will depend upon the Lord for guidance and direction. Then it remains the Lord's work, and that cannot fail. The wisdom of men shall perish, and the works of men shall come to naught with frustration.